Chapter 51, Teacher. Artorius, in the end, reached a contract with Scathatch. It was a geis, an unbreakable oath in Celtic magecraft. Scathatch agreed to teach Artorius everything she knew. She would teach him as much as he could learn. That was the price Artorius had to pay. As for Scathatch, her price was to seriously discuss with Artorius, to engage in a matter that concerned the fate of the world. And as long as Artorius proposed a viable plan, she would provide him with sufficient assistance. Thus, this geis, this oath, was sealed. This wicked and unequal treaty was established under Scathach's coercion. Originally, she only intended to teach, not to assist in his matters. But Artorius Pendragon remained steadfast. He shamelessly declared that his learning was not for sale. He wouldn't be her disciple unless he was paid enough. In the end, Scathatch had to compromise. Then, looking at this kid before her, whining as if greatly wronged, Scathatch realized she had been deceived. Damn it! She had to be his teacher and teach him skills. She had to help him tirelessly with significant tasks. It seemed like she was being taken advantage of inside and out. What's more, this kid even looked at her with a resentful gaze. Then, Artorius spoke, "I am prepared, teacher." He stood up, facing Scathach's gloomy and angry gaze, and firmly declared, "Although this contract was signed by your coercion and intimidation, as a knight, a leader, and a good person who keeps promises, I will fulfill our contract without compromise. It's best if you think that way." "Teacher, your smile is so wicked. Did you eat something wrong?" "Not really. Teacher has contracted a strange illness. It's called can't resist bullying, a cute and troublesome pretty boy." "Teacher, please don't joke around. Such a funny illness doesn't exist in this world." "Teacher, what's wrong with you, teacher? Please don't come closer with that terrifying face." No, teacher, what are you doing?" After ruthlessly tormenting Artorius's adorable, handsome face for a gruesome half-hour, Scathatch finally regained her cold and tranquil demeanor. Like a brilliant mandrake flower from the land of the dead, enchanting and untouchable. At the same time, Artorius rubbed his reddish face, looking at his future teacher with a resentful gaze. Although he occasionally still pretended to be a pure and innocent boy, he was actually 16 years old, god damn it. Being treated like a child and having his face pinched ruthlessly, it was really... "All right, stop pretending." Once again, Scathatch spoke these words, "I'm delighted that you're cooperating with my torment. But it's a bit much to put on such a pitiful expression." "No, this time I'm not pretending." Artorius continued to look at her with a pitiful gaze. "Teacher, you really hurt me, a fragile and pure-hearted youth with wounded pride." "You." Hearing Artorius say this, Scathatch shook her head in resignation, always smiling and lying. "I don't even know which of your words to believe." "Then believe them all." Artorius had a confident demeanor. "As your disciple, I would never deceive my teacher, right?" Scathatch chuckled. The purple-haired beauty stretched her slender and graceful figure, pleasing Artorius's eyes. Scathatch had no comment on his pervert's gaze. She had already had her fill today. And she didn't dislike Artorius, who was so cunning and calculating little devil. Because she knew that the more Artorius used words, thoughts, and ideas, the more he gained advantages. A clever, sly, handsome, and exceptional little devil like him, she genuinely didn't dislike at all. "Starting tomorrow, embrace your own hell," Scathatch said to Artorius. "I'll train you well, Artorius." After saying these words, she turned around and disappeared without a trace. Perhaps she had returned to the land of shadows. At the same time, Artorius waited a while but realized he still hadn't woken up from the dream. "Isn't it time yet? Where can I go next?" he muttered to himself. In the dreamland within the reverse side, one could theoretically go anywhere, yet it felt like one couldn't go anywhere at all. The only two reliable options were Avalon and the Holy Spring, the two landmarks etched in memory. Should I go and settle things with that pink-haired woman, the things we didn't finish yesterday? Or should I comfort my big sister Vivian's injured heart? It's really difficult to decide. Artorius pondered over this matter. Then he decided that going to Avalon was indeed more important. After all, big sister Vivian was so soft and easily fooled. It would be too mean if he didn't treat her well. With that thought in mind, Artorius appeared next to the holy spring. Then he undressed and began bathing. The water in the spring was cool. All the mental trauma from his brawl with Scathatch had vanished. But why had he ended up here instead of heading to Avalon? Could it be that deep down he was actually a worthless scumbag? No, that's definitely not it. I just got lost, that's all. Tomorrow, I'll reach the real Avalon, definitely. Artorius immersed his whole body in the holy spring and blew bubbles. That's what he thought in his heart. At the same time, in the woods beside the holy spring, the treetops rustled slightly, shifting position. The next morning, despite getting his head bashed by Scat Hatch, Artorius considered himself fortunate, thanks to the healing properties of the holy spring. So when Artorius woke up the next day, he felt refreshed. His mind was clear, and his efficiency in doing things had greatly improved. The effect of that spring is really quite impressive. I should visit it often in the future, Artorius thought happily, completely unaware that something interesting had happened at the holy spring after he left. Damn it! It was Medb, the one Artorius had been searching for all day yesterday, but couldn't find anywhere. After Artorius had left, the joy she had felt from secretly watching the handsome youth bathe vanished, leaving only embarrassment and regret. She gritted her teeth and walked toward the holy spring. This spring belongs to me, and yet he dared to bathe in it. Muttering these words, Medb suddenly felt her mouth becoming dry and parched. She was thirsty. She needed to quench her thirst. So. Glug, 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 glug. Chapter 52, Lie. Besides the holy spring, after Medb drank her fill of water, she lazily wore a pleasant expression and then fell into a peculiar state of confusion like someone who got heavily drunk, gazing at the sun and making strange abba 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 sounds. Essentially, she became useless. At the same time, Artorius and Mordred's next destination was Camelot. Because their final target was none other than Merlin. Although Artorius had also attempted to find that guy, Merlin, in dreams, he couldn't locate him no matter what. Who knows where that guy ran off to, flirting with flowers and grass, or perhaps he was avoiding Artorius and didn't want to meet him. The former scenario was somewhat better. Artorius would eventually encounter him in Camelot. However, if it was the latter, the situation remained uncertain. Heading to Camelot would take several more days. So today, Artorius was sleeping on the shores of Wales. This barren mountainous region was one of the last refuges for the Celts in history. After enduring the invasions of the Anglo-Saxons and Vikings, the Celts of Wales eventually succumbed to the tides of time. The Norman invasion led by William, the illegitimate son from Normandy, is also one of the most famous events in English history. He defeated the Anglo-Saxons in England, established the rule of the Norman dynasty, and attacked Wales. Through cunning tactics and superior military strength, he forced the Welsh to acknowledge his son as their leader. Since then, successive English princes have held the title of Prince of Wales. Although Wales still existed from a legal perspective, in practical terms, Wales had been annexed by Britain. It's quite ironic, hey? Artorius couldn't help but think. He also reflected on the popular Three Kings banquet that became famous in later eras from Fate/Zero. Looking back now, both Gilgamesh and Alexander seemed to speak without reservation. Of course, Gilgamesh must know much more, viewing things from a different perspective. As for Alexander, he had lived his whole life carefree and joyful, so even if he met his demise, it wouldn't matter to him. With this realization, Artorius closed his eyes and entered the dreamland once again. This time, nothing strange happened. The path in the dream was clear, directly leading to Avalon. Artorius. Well, this kind of situation is quite common too. Moreover, upon careful consideration, going to Avalon to comfort Vivian was one of Artorius's predetermined goals, wasn't it? It had been 5 or 6 days since he last saw Vivian. There was a 2-day gap from their regular encounters. If this continued, the fairy might turn dark again and become a Yandere fairy. Dealing with that situation wouldn't be good. So today, Artorius also feigned exhaustion and enjoyed the facial cleanser from his big sister. Truly, fairies were amazing creatures. They wouldn't age, and their personalities wouldn't change. No matter how long had passed, their spirits remained as firm as ever. They were truly a wonderful indulgence for men. So, have you been busy these past few days? Unlike Artorius's concern about Vivian being upset due to his late arrival, it was quite the opposite. In his somewhat surprised state, the other party was showing concern for him. Because Artorius had previously appeared troubled, Vivian, as the kind and amiable big sister, felt it was her duty to help Artorius overcome his worries. Whether in daily life, on a spiritual level, or in matters of the body, it was all the same. In fact, well, it's nothing. As Artorius said this, he thought, finally it's coming to an end. The so-called end naturally referred to finally revealing the situation and then pleading for Vivian's help. What exactly is going on? This time, Vivian was determined. She was resolved to make Artorius speak about his difficulties. We're family, right? Vivian gently said to him. Artorius is my beloved. Since my beloved is facing difficulties, I must help, I must alleviate Artorius's troubles. Vivian. Watching Vivian's sincere expression, Artorius was genuinely moved. His emotions were not feigned, he was truly touched from the bottom of his heart. Despite Artorius's sly and manipulative nature, and his penchant for lying and deception, he was genuinely a good child. The reason he did all of that was also for the greater good. Being a good child, it was only natural for him to feel moved when he encountered such sincere treatment from a big sister. In addition to the sense of being moved, there was also a hint of guilt. After all, the other person treated him so well, yet he still intended to deceive her. But it doesn't matter anyway. I'm sure Vivian will be fine. After the fleeting pang of guilt dissipated, Artorius wore a solemn expression and said to his big sister, Vivian, it's about the life and death of our Britain, and it's been haunting me day and night. Oh. I see. Vivian responded. Upon hearing Artorius's reason, the fairy Vivian displayed an expression that seemed to say, just as I expected. If Artorius didn't disclose his difficulties, Vivian would naturally make her own guesses. The result of her speculation was as follows. As someone at the top of Britain and a serious, responsible good child, from Vivian's perspective, upon learning that his country was on the verge of destruction, he would naturally feel distressed, troubled, and would desperately try to find a solution to salvage everything. Just like this child's mother, Artoria. Isn't it already being resolved? Vivian comforted Artorius and said, the Knights of the Round Table are all searching for the Holy Grail. Once you obtain it, this matter can be resolved, right? Britain can be saved, right? Is that really the case? Listening to the fairy's words, Artorius looked at her earnestly and asked. Of course, it's true. Trust your big sister, Vivian replied. Under Artorius's sincere gaze, the fairy couldn't help but avert her eyes shyly. As one of the most exceptional mages in the waning age of gods, Vivian had some understanding of fate and proper human history. She knew that Britain in the age of gods was fated to perish. It was a predetermined event. In order to ensure the accuracy of proper human history, the counter-force would spare no effort to ensure its completion. And even if, hypothetically, Britain defied fate and managed to save itself, that wouldn't guarantee redemption and happiness. On the contrary, it would become an existence akin to a lost belt and be judged by the world. So, the idea of obtaining the Holy Grail can save Britain from its doomed fate was nothing more than a gentle yet cruel consolation. To put it more seriously and realistically, it was a goddamn lie. Chapter 53, Merlin's Fault. Can't you give me an answer? Artorius looked earnestly at the silver-haired, red-eyed fairy, his expression serious. It made Vivian feel even more sorry for Artorius. Her original plan was to bring him to Avalon when he was about to perish with Britain after his failed efforts. This plan had gained the strong support of her other sister, Morgan Le Fay, in recent times. From the perspective of the Lady of the Lake, Vivian represented the good side of the Lady of the Lake, while Morgan Le Fay represented the evil side. They were sisters despite not having any blood relation. Vivian didn't yet know why Morgan suddenly supported her plan. However, that wasn't the most important thing right now. The most important thing was still how to handle Artorius's questioning. Artorius spoke in such a way because he must have sensed that something was amiss. He might have even obtained some information and evidence. Vivian, who was unaware that Artorius was a reincarnator from another world, thought so. She pondered on how to brush off this matter. Even if Artorius would despise her afterward, just like how Artoria despises Merlin, Vivian decided to continue deceiving him for his own sake. As for Artorius getting angry, hating her, or harboring resentment afterward, Vivian had considered 180 ways to resolve this matter. Although Britain would be destroyed, the Pendragon family would survive. Morgan Le Fay, Artoria, Artorius, and even Mordred, they could all be brought to Avalon. There, they would enjoy endless life and happiness, far away from troubles, experiencing pure familial bliss. As for the anger and resentment that would arise from Britain's destruction, she believed it would gradually dissipate over time. Vivian tried her best to manipulate Artorius in 180 different ways so that even if he resented her, he wouldn't be able to truly hate her, especially when their children were born. Don't lie, big sis Vivian. Vivian's wishful thinking was shattered by Artorius. Her plans would never work for him. I already know everything about the proper human history and the fated demise of Britain and the Celts. The idea that finding the Holy Grail can save Britain is nothing but a lie you and Merlin wove together, isn't it? The hidden secret inside her was suddenly exposed. Vivian couldn't utter a word as she looked at Artorius, who spoke with righteousness and anger. After a moment of silence, she turned her head slightly and whispered to Artorius. It's mainly Merlin's fault, Artorius. I only knew and kept it secret. Big sis Vivian. Artorius's voice was low, making the fairy feel even more sorrowful. You were saying before that we were family and shouldn't hide anything from each other. But now it has turned out like this. I never intended to deceive you, Artorius. Whether intentional or not, it remains an act of deception. What's even more troubling is that this deception revolves around such a crucial matter. It's not only deceiving me, it's also deceiving my father. All of you are truly despicable. There isn't a single good person among you. As Artorius shouted out those lines in frustration, his emotions became slightly unstable. At least half of what he said while yelling at the fairy, Vivian, was true because what they had done was truly outrageous. Of course, the fairy, although despicable and rotten, was mostly aware but remained silent, merely an accomplice. The real scoundrel was that infamous shady and scammer bastard. He had truly deceived Artoria all her life. That scoundrel should bear at least half the responsibility. Because that scoundrel had always been telling Artoria, it can be saved, as long as you do this and that, Britain can be saved. When someone has no expectations, they are vulnerable to disappointment. Likewise, when they have already lost everything, there is no room for further loss. Despair only emerges when hope existed but ultimately proved unattainable. So, if possible, Artorius actually wanted to question and berate Merlin heavily. But unfortunately, he couldn't find Merlin, so he had to settle with Vivian for now. Artorius. In this situation, under Artorius's semi-angry and semi-fake expression, the fairy felt utterly ashamed. He stood up, seething with anger, ready to leave. The fairy completely lost her composure. Wait, Artorius, wait. She hurriedly stopped Artorius, then looked at his expression and made up her mind. She used her most potent weapon, her breast, to directly embrace him. Please, Artorius, listen to me. Vivian gently spoke to Artorius, saying, all of this is Merlin's fault. I am also a victim, deceived by Merlin. Really? But, Artorius couldn't help but snort coldly in his mind. He had expected her to come up with a better excuse in her rush, but this. Vivian's reasoning was truly terrible. Rather than explaining, it seemed more like shifting the blame. But, this was really big and soft. With the female fairy's ample breast forcefully and softly sticking to Artorius, any discontent in his heart was neutralized by the warm and cozy feeling. Thus, Artorius accepted the fairy's apology and the reasons she provided. Vivian was innocent. Everything was Merlin's fault. But, after figuring things out, Artorius also responded to Vivian's embrace. Using his face, he rubbed against Vivian's breast, saying to her, but the problem still needs to be solved, big sis. I've been racking my brain over this matter. Hearing Artorius say this, Vivian also started pondering over it. When you know there's no way to solve a certain situation, it's either foolishness or stupidity to challenge it. How should they go about saving Britain? After much contemplation, I came up with a solution that is not really a solution. With Vivian staring at him in a bewildered manner, Artorius happily said to her. In proper human history, the counter-force seeks to end the age of gods and the Celts. So, as long as we become something else, can't we just slip through unnoticed? In this way, Artorius revealed his plan of usurping fate to Vivian. Chapter 54, Irony. As long as Britain becomes Franks and the Celts become Germanic peoples, then we'll definitely win, right? Artorius concluded with a smile, then looked at Vivian cheerfully. What do you think, big sis Vivian? Aren't I clever? Well, yes, you're indeed clever. Vivian reluctantly replied, forcing a smile, trying not to dampen Artorius's enthusiasm. Meanwhile, she was contemplating hard in her mind. In theory, it might work, but can it really be done? Could it deceive the counterforce? But, the counterforce, in the end, is just a counterforce. It doesn't possess human-like emotions of being fooled. So as long as Britain's Celtic civilization perishes, it won't get angry, probably. In that case, this plan, it's really... No, wait. Everything now is discussed under the premise of successful usurpation of fate. The question is, can fate truly be usurped? Vivian couldn't help but ponder, and quickly arrived at a conclusion similar to Morgan's. After all, both of them were basically Lady of the Lake with similar abilities, albeit in different areas. Morgan excelled in creating homunculus and potions, while Vivian's talents focused on fooling children and creating magical tools. All right. After understanding all this and seeing the expectant expression on Artorius's face, Vivian's heart swelled with determination. Let's give it a try, she thought. Even if it's just for this child. Okay. I promise you. Vivian said to him. I'll help you usurp the fate of Franks, Anglo-Saxons and even all the Germanic peoples. Ooh. Artorius cheered happily and looked at her with adoring eyes. Big sis Vivian is amazing. As expected of you, you're incredible. I really like Big Sis Vivian the most. After saying these words that pumped him up, Artorius continued rubbing and snuggling in Vivian's embrace, generously offering his body. This made Mordred, who wanted her daily artenium the next day, furious. So, on that day, Mordred remained in a state of strangeness and doubt, filled with confusion. Clearly, Mordred had always been with her big brother. They hadn't been separated, and there was no sign of any strange pests or anything of the sort around her big brother. Why, then, did her big brother occasionally struggle and look exhausted? He couldn't even scrape together the usual portion for his little sister, yet had the audacity to say something like a dragon never bows its head. Seriously. At the same time, Artorius felt a bit embarrassed himself. One could say it was all thanks to the Lady of the Lake, after all. She had directly milked him dry and she said, "This is to show you that your big sister has the ability to usurp fate." What was the correlation between them? Could it be compared? One was usurping fate, while the other was usurping life. She devoured him like no tomorrow. Are you sure you're a fairy and not a succubus? Luckily, dragons not only have great endurance but also strong stamina. In just a few minutes, Artorius had recovered and generously offered Mordred her share, free of charge. It made Mordred realize that a dragon never bows its head wasn't a scam. Artorius successfully guarded his little sister's happiness, and as they continued on their way to Camelot, Mordred remained happy, cheerful, and radiant. By the way, it's actually like this. Adhering to the resolve of "I will never deceive little Mo," Artorius told her about his experiences in his dreams. It's the land of shadows and Scathatch. Have you heard of them? Yeah, I've heard of them. Weren't we going to Ireland to find that person? But we couldn't find the place. Riding on a horse, Mordred responded casually as they headed toward Camelot. By the way, the road conditions in Britain were really terrible. These roads that connected various territories, cities, and castles in Britain mainly were built during the Roman era. Since Britain entered an era of warfare, these roads were not maintained or repaired. Many roads had already collapsed and were impassable. The reason for this was Britain's divided situation and internal chaos. Starting from Artorius's grandfather, King Uther's time, the entire Britain was fragmented. The so-called kings of those small kingdoms lacked the capability and sufficient resources to carry out infrastructure development. In their eyes, roads were extremely dangerous. They weren't just transportation routes or passages for commercial and material exchanges, they were potentially deadly routes enemies could exploit to attack them. In such circumstances, forget about maintaining and repairing roads, some individuals would even intentionally destroy roads to hinder enemy advances, making their territories more formidable. As the King of Britain, both King Uther and King Arthur only unified Britain in name. King Uther fared slightly better. He relied on marriage alliances and the Roman legacy to maintain some authority. There was still some weight to it. But King Arthur was different. In the beginning, King Arthur was just a tool for salvation. Not to mention the various kingdoms in Britain, even within Camelot itself, there were countless lords, nobles, and knights who didn't accept King Arthur's rule. After all, everyone had their own interests and land to protect. Why should they listen to someone who drew a sword from a stone out of nowhere and declared himself a king? Because in childhood, King Arthur was not acknowledged as the heir by his father, Uther. Since Arthur was in truth born a female known as Artoria, while Uther wanted a male as his successor. That's why she was given into Merlin's care and later on entrusted to an ordinary knight named Ector as his own child and raised as a male. Because of that reason, King Arthur's initial identity was completely unknown since it was kept secret, and so she ascended to the throne without the support of the people. That's why, her attempts to build certain infrastructure received no response whatsoever. And once she achieved a resounding victory over the Saxons, she poured almost all of her resources into the futile pursuit of the Holy Grail. There was no money left to repair the roads. What irony! This can't go on. Artorius couldn't help but think, when I become the king of Britain, I'll have to repair all these roads. And, if possible, build new highways. At the same time, Mordred beside him said, by the way, Father sent almost all the knights of the Round Table to search for the Holy Grail, right? Yet. Artorius replied. The Holy Grail. Can it really grant people's wishes? Who knows? Artorius shook his head. Rather than placing one's wishes on something intangible, I still believe in my own power. Oh! If it had been Mordred from before, when Artorius uttered such a blatant denial of King Arthur's actions, she would have been upset. Even if she didn't make a scene on the spot, she will hold a grudge silently. But now was different. The way she responded with a simple "oh" indicated that she already understood and didn't really bother about King Arthur's matters anymore. The reason for this change was that she now loved and worshipped her big brother Artorius more than anyone else. Chapter 55, Sisters' Conflict. Artorius and Mordred's impending return to the city of Camelot had already been conveyed to Artoria's desk through scouts and messengers. This brought both joy and concern to her. The joy was naturally due to the reunion of father and son, bringing happiness to the whole family. In the midst of dedicating almost all resources and nearly all the exceptional knights to the pursuit of the Holy Grail, Artoria's heart felt heavy and depressed. In this situation, being able to reunite with her child after a long separation would naturally console her weary soul. The concern, on the other hand, arose from Artorius's identity and the reason for his return. Rumors of this nature had been circulating within King Arthur's court and even among neighboring countries. Artorius's return to Camelot was said to be a request for King Arthur to abdicate, with him taking over Camelot, as well as the entire territory, status, and most importantly, the army of Britain. And it was the army that mattered the most. Presently, Artorius commanded half of the knights of the Round Table. In terms of military strength and the number of knights, Artorius had amassed tens of thousands of loyal soldiers, including over 1,000 elite knights and triple the number of heavy cavalry, making him much stronger than King Arthur. However, when it came to top-notch experts, King Arthur still had the upper hand. One reliable rumor amidst the hearsay of when will Artorius become the Roman emperor was once Artorius becomes the king of Britain and gains the loyalty of all of Britain, he will launch a total attack on Rome, along with the Briton knights, his loyal Germanic men, and other barbarians. Even Artoria herself had mixed feelings about this plausible rumor. She feared that her beloved son would return, walking into the city of Camelot amidst flowers and applause, only for her to ask him, Artorius, what are you doing here? Artorius would respond, I am here to claim your throne, father. Then he would draw the clarent, and strike at her. If that were the case, how would Artoria confront her own son? To make matters worse, the knights of the Round Table were all absent, gone in search of the Holy Grail. At this moment, Artoria didn't even have someone to discuss matters with. So, she tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Until she heard a voice next to her during one of her shifts. Sorry, Guinevere. Artoria said apologetically, thinking that her constant tossing and turning had disturbed her nominal queen's sleep. But that wasn't the case. When she turned and looked, any trace of drowsiness that had finally emerged completely vanished. Because beside her was not her nominal queen Guinevere, but someone who looked like an adult version of herself. It was her sister, Morgan Le Fay, smiling, dressed in a robe, with a graceful figure. Morgan Le Fay. Even though she was in Camelot, blessed by fairies and resistant to magic, Morgan had still managed to enter. Sending all the knights of the Round Table away had weakened Camelot's defences to an unacceptable level, allowing Morgan to infiltrate easily. Thinking of this, Artoria reached for the sword by her pillow. Just like Artorius, in this chaotic era, any seasoned warrior would keep their weapon within easy reach at all times. Gripping the sword of promised victory, which was the legendary Excalibur, she pointed the blade at Morgan. Only after clutching her weapon did Artoria breathe a slight sigh of relief. However, her gaze toward Morgan remained cautious. "Calm down, my dear sister." In contrast, Morgan smiled, seemingly unconcerned. "I didn't come here to fight with you. No matter what, you are not welcome here." If it were before, Artoria might not have acted this way. However, prior to this, she had suffered several losses at the hands of Morgan. There were even a few instances where Morgan had nearly brought her to the brink of death. Of course, Artoria didn't yet know that her losses to Morgan had been avenged by her filial son, Artorius. In any case, after learning that her sister was a twisted and evil woman, Artoria no longer harbored any hope about Morgan. On the eve of Britain's impending destruction, Artoria didn't have much time left to indulge in games with her wicked sister. Hurry and leave. Rather than resorting to direct violence, Artoria wanted Morgan to depart. This was the greatest compromise Artoria was capable of making. "Don't be so impatient." Nevertheless, Morgan continued to smile. "I've already told you, I didn't come here to fight you. Besides, do you think I would come to this place if I had nothing else to do? Camelot is in a terrible state, reeking of decay from every corner. Every moment spent here makes me nauseous." "Then leave." "Not yet, at least." Morgan smiled cheerfully. "Because I have been entrusted with a task that requires me to stay in Camelot for a while." "Entrusted? By whom?" "You don't know yet." Seeing Artoria's puzzled expression, Morgan appeared as though she had stumbled upon something incredibly amusing. She raised the corners of her mouth, revealing a joyful smile, and said to Artoria, "It's your son." Morgan spoke happily to Artoria. "I didn't infiltrate, nor did I break in. I came here properly, invited by my dear nephew. That's why I'm here, my dear sister." "Artorius? That can't be." "Why not?" Without hesitation, Morgan spoke loudly to her. "Just because he's your son. Or because he's your subordinate." "Neither of those reasons, my dear sister. My dear nephew has unique standards for evaluating people. Love doesn't shut someone out just because you don't like them for silly reasons. In his lovely evaluation, I play an important role, my dear sister." This time, Artoria couldn't find the words to respond. Because she knew her wicked sister was speaking the truth. At least, it sounded like the truth. "That's all for now." After saying this, Morgan seemed satisfied. "I came here today just to say hello. I will be staying in Camelot from now on. Farewell, my dear sister." Yes, from the start, Morgan addressed Artoria as sister. She was one of the few who knew Artoria's true gender, and she had kept it a secret for Artoria's reign. "I'll be keeping an eye on you." Finally, with an unwilling tone, Artoria uttered these words. "I'll be watching you closely, and I will ask Artorius if you are lying." Morgan didn't hear what Artoria said afterward, nor did she care to listen. Now she had found a new obsession, and her interest in her sister had fallen from first place to second, and the gap between the two was growing wider. With her new hobbies, her obsession with Artoria was diminishing, almost to the point of insignificance. Chapter 56, Land of Shadows. What foolishness! Morgan thought happily as she walked down the corridors of Camelot Castle towards her room. Yes, as the Princess of Camelot, she still had her own room in the White Castle of Camelot. Even though she was a witch and stood against Artoria, her status and position as a princess, along with the most important treatment, wouldn't change because of all the nonsense mentioned above. Despite her disgust towards Camelot, which she criticized as a filthy and nasty place, having room to rest in the current situation was quite convenient. Morgan didn't mind taking advantage of such convenience. Damn it! At the same time, Artoria Pendragon, with her hand no longer gripping the sword, was overwhelmed by negative emotions. She was worried about her evil sister, Morgan, and what evil deeds she might have done to her beloved, innocent, kind, pure, and weak son. On the other hand, Artoria was also concerned about whether the situation was as Morgan had described. Was it true that Artorius had invited her to Camelot? Considering the news of Artorius soon returning to Camelot, what Morgan said was likely the truth. At least part of it. If that was the case, then the scene Artoria least wanted to see would probably unfold: her beloved, innocent, and kind son falling under the influence of the evil witch, Morgan Le Fay. Could it be that Artorius's actions over the past 2 years were all instigated by Morgan? Artoria's hatred towards Morgan intensified once again. Of course, Morgan didn't care if she knew what Artoria was thinking. Even if she knew, aside from the strange responses of absurd slander and you really have no idea what kind of person your precious son is, it would likely bring her more joy and indifference. Even though they lived together as father and son, their understanding of each other was inferior to that of Morgan's encounters with Artorius, since she already saw the two sides of Artorius. There's no need to explain the joy. As for indifference, it's for the aforementioned reasons. Artoria was no longer Morgan's primary target. It's quite amusing to think about. Artoria still considered her as the greatest enemy, yet Morgan no longer cared about Artoria. In this roundabout way, it could be said that she had outwitted her foolish sister, in a sense. Phew phew phew. Joyful feelings come and go quickly. In this bizarre situation, defeating minor enemies like her sister no longer brought Morgan much joy for long. Now, the only person who could bring her unparalleled pleasure was Artorius. She wanted to thoroughly defeat him, and return the shame he brought upon her with 100-fold, 1,000-fold vengeance. She wanted to pour all of her emotions onto him. She wanted to mock him, beat him, insult him, abuse him, despise him, hate him, imprison him, nurture him, kiss him, torment him, praise him, serve him, violate him, love him. She wanted to strip him of everything, completely and utterly, making him hers in body and soul. Only then could Morgan experience the utmost delight. Phew phew phew, I was careless last time, but this time, my dear nephew, I won't let you win so easily. He 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 he. Ha ha ha. Meanwhile, Artorius, who still had more than half a day's journey remaining to Camelot, suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. As if a certain evil, MILF, Yandere aunt had set her sights on him. Is Morgan still not giving up? It seems the lesson I gave her last time wasn't profound enough, hey. Before saying good night to Mordred and drifting off to sleep, Artorius began to devise a plan for Morgan's re-education. He wanted to teach his dear aunt to become a gentle, kind, and refined lady. First, like this, then like that, and this way, ha ha ha. Brother's smile is so creepy. Mordred said in her mind while observing her brother's expression. As time passed, both Artorius and Mordred had fallen asleep and entered the dreamland. It wasn't Avalon, nor was it the Holy Spring. The sky was dark as if shrouded in clouds or enveloped in nighttime. The surrounding forests, trees, shrubs, and grasses were all dark. Grey, purple, black looking eerie and ominous. Is this the land of shadows, brother? Just as it appeared now, Mordred had already been educated by Artorius to become a well-behaved and polite child. As for the current situation, it was naturally the training with Scathatch they had agreed upon before. Similarly, as agreed with Scathatch, Artorius had brought Mordred along. For Mordred, although being educated by someone else was a bit displeasing, her brother's orders were absolute. So she agreed to come along. As for Mordred's question, well, I suppose so. Artorius said. Artorius had never been to the land of shadows before, but judging by the surrounding terrain and vegetation, it wasn't hard to guess. They were indeed in the land of shadows. So, what should we do next? Mordred looked at him with anticipation, while Artorius himself felt somewhat troubled. Speaking of which, he had made an agreement with Scathatch to come to the land of shadows yesterday to receive some lessons. But yesterday, he had changed his course and went straight to Avalon instead. And he also managed to settle things with Vivian along the way. That was undoubtedly a good thing. However, from another perspective, Artorius had broken the agreement with Scathatch. Although they hadn't spent much time together, Artorius could tell that Scathatch was a bit petty. So, for now, it would be better to be cautious, a little more cautious. With a cautious mindset, Artorius and Mordred moved forward together. After passing through the purplish-grey forest, they suddenly arrived at a clear open space. The breathtaking view before them made Mordred exclaim, "Ah!" in surprise. It was a sea of alluring red mandala flowers. Amidst this floral paradise, the most radiant, enchanting, and dazzling figure was Scathatch, gracefully wielding her dual spears. "You're late, Artorius." "Well, please let me explain, teacher." While Artorius was contemplating what excuse to come up with, Scathatch swiftly attacked. "Oh, you naughty kid! I'll have to punish you properly." Swinging her dual spears, the Queen of the Land of Shadows appeared before Artorius in a graceful manner, her crimson spear aimed directly at his vital points. At the same time, Mordred swiftly moved forward and shielded him behind her. Chapter 57, Join the fight. No matter who you are, you're not allowed to harm my brother. Mordred swung her sword, blocking Scathika's attack. Oh! Scathika's attitude was slightly peculiar in response to this action. A lively child, hey? I don't dislike it, but by saying those words, you understand that you've become the target of my wrath in his place, right? No matter who you are, no matter what you intend to do, hurting my brother is unacceptable. Oh? You've been educated well. Let me see then, aside from your big talk, what else do you have? While speaking, Scathatch brandished her dual spears, unleashing a fierce and swift storm-like assault that engulfed Mordred. Scathika's attitude was relaxed, and her demeanor was equally carefree. It was evident that she didn't consider the battle against Mordred as something too significant or consequential. Damn it! In contrast, Mordred, despite her fierce determination and desire for victory, fell short compared to Scathatch in the most crucial aspect: strength. If one were to compare their stats, Mordred was considerably inferior to Artorius. After all, he was the frost dragon, while Mordred was just a young dragon. However, when it came to pure technique, Mordred was somewhat stronger than Artorius. As mentioned before, Artorius was a leader with a larger army and territory. He was a ruler. That's why he rarely took matters into his own hands to defeat someone. It was more common for warriors like Mordred to handle such tasks. As a result, she gained more experience points than him. Although Mordred appeared foolish on the surface, it was mostly a facade. The true Mordred was intelligent, even cunning. Especially after receiving Artorius's careful guidance over the past 2 years, her adaptability in actual combat had grown stronger. Therefore, you can do it, little Mo. From the rear, Artorius acted as a cheerleader, encouraging and supporting Mordred. And now, she had realized that her strength fell far short of Scathika's, and if she continued to engage in a head-on fight, she would definitely be no match for her. So, just like the previous battle between Artorius and Scathatch, she switched from offense to defense, employing numerous tactics. You're a clever child. I don't dislike that. Watching this scene unfold, Scathika's lips curled up, revealing a pleased smile. Damn you! Although Scathika's statement was not intended as mockery, it felt that way to Mordred. And just like an angered lion, her fur stood on end. I will definitely defeat you. Meanwhile, Artorius had completely taken on the role of a bystander and began analyzing the match between Scathatch and Mordred. Little Mo's physical attributes are almost on par with Scathatch. However, her combat experience and technique are far inferior to Scathatch. Today Scathatch didn't use magecraft and solely relied on martial skills alone to fight. But even so, the chances of Mordred winning are not high. It's a 70-30. While Artorius was thinking this, he was earnestly observing Scathatch and Mordred's moves, trying to grasp their fighting styles and tactical considerations. He pondered whether he could integrate these techniques and ideas with his own to enhance his own strength. Scathatch is truly amazing. Every inch makes her stronger. Perhaps I should learn some spearmanship as well. They seem advantageous in one-on-one combat. Artorius couldn't help but contemplate. Recalling the battle between Diarmuid and Artoria during the Fourth Holy Grail War, it all felt quite strange. It was one sword versus dual spears, and in the end, without unleashing their noble phantasms, the odds were evenly split. This probably indicated that Artoria's actual combat prowess was stronger than Diarmuid's. Keep it up, little Mo. Artorius encouraged his sister while letting his mind wander. Hoo-hoo. Mordred responded, whether in anger or in acknowledgement of her brother's call, it was hard to tell. But one thing was certain, after Artorius's words of encouragement, she seemed to have gained a significant boost, and her combat prowess had become even stronger. They have such a good bond. Scathatch couldn't help but think as she witnessed the scene. Then she shifted her attention to Artorius and playfully said, "Hey, hiding in the back while your little sister fights in the front, are you even a man?" Artorius replied with a relaxed tone, "I had my turn a couple of days ago." It was more like an introductory test for the new disciples. So this time, it's little Mo's turn. Hat. Scathatch chuckled, her long purple hair flowing. It seemed odd to have long hair like that during a battle, as it would typically be a hindrance. However, Scathatch had infused her flowing locks with magecraft, allowing them to effortlessly dodge her own weapons, line of sight, and even her skin. On the other hand, Mordred occasionally found her face tickled by stray strands of her hair, causing a slight itch. It was frustrating for her as she couldn't scratch it with her hands, leading to a feeling of discomfort that made her fiercely angry. She let out an irritated howl. I had the same thought as. Mordred began to speak, but before she could finish, multiple magical spears appeared behind Scathatch, numbering a total of 32. They were all Geebalgs, identical in style and seemingly just as powerful as the 2 red spears she held in her hand. Seeing you enjoying yourself so freely, makes me feel annoyed, Scathatch said, and all the red spears were unleashed toward Artorius in unison. Oh! At first, Artorius contemplated mimicking Berserker Lancelot when using Knight of Honor against Gilgamesh. But unfortunately, his combat skills were slightly inferior to Lancelot's after he became a Berserker heroic spirit. The barrage of magical spear attacks unleashed by Scathatch with her long spear was far more potent than those of Gilgamesh since he simply haphazardly threw his collection of weapons without the level of mastery and familiarity that she possessed. So, after reluctantly intercepting the first spear and using it to deflect the second, Artorius abandoned the spear and drew his sword, Clarent. After all, using an unfamiliar weapon in battle was akin to suicide. And thus, Artorius Pendragon joined the fight. Chapter 58, 2-on-1. Ooh! Clearly, fighting alongside Artorius was an encouragement for Mordred. Come on, big brother, let's defeat this woman together. She shouted loudly while wielding her sword more fiercely, charging forward with valor. Artorius responded with a pleasant hum, acknowledging Mordred's words. Although he didn't want to offend his teacher too much, in this situation, he had no choice but to face it head-on. So, this is the fighting style of this child. Scathatch confirmed with clarity that during her charge, Mordred instinctively protected Artorius by her side, shielding his flank. At the same time, Mordred's position allowed her to rush forward and block any sudden attacks on him. Of course, Artorius, who advanced silently in tandem with her, was almost the same. They covered each other, one wielding Clarent and another wielding a sword with specifications and style very similar to Clarent, both swinging at Scathatch. Their synchronized cooperation and correct tactics not only multiplied their power but even momentarily suppressed a formidable opponent like Scathatch. Even in the face of Scathach's deadly spear thrusts, Artorius and Mordred still held the advantage. We can do it, we can win. 2 swords suppressed 2 spears. Artorius and Mordred almost encircled Scathatch, launching a concerted attack. If we keep this up, victory will be ours. Artorius also felt a sense of joy. Although he didn't care too much about winning or losing, since they could win, who would enjoy losing? Not bad at all. Scathach's eyes shimmered unlike the battle with Artorius 2 days ago. That battle was more focused on intellect, trickery, and schemes. Today's battle was a straightforward clash. There were no tricks or schemes, no traps or conspiracies. Artorius and Mordred employed a frontal assault. The most important, or rather, the most crucial reason for this approach was this style of battle instantly ignited Scathach's warrior spirit. Such a good child, both your physical abilities and technique are excellent. I haven't been this excited in a long time. As she joyfully declared, 25 primordial rune appeared around her, swiftly rotating. They exuded Land of Shadows' characteristic dimness and ominous crimson hue, tinting Scathach's dual irises with a blood-red color, filled with joy, excitement, and a touch of madness. In that instant, the pressure on Artorius and Mordred skyrocketed. As one of the top-tier mages from Age of Gods and possessing the primordial rune, Scathatch possessed an immensely powerful magical force. However, she usually refrained from displaying this power. Rather than magecraft or anything of the sort, Scathatch still preferred, trusted, and excelled in wielding her spears. And this moment was no exception. Unlike directly using magecraft to create various offensive techniques, Scathatch employed enhancement magecraft. She used the primordial rune to enhance her own strength to an astonishing degree of enhancement, even surpassing the most top-tier phantasmal species dragons. Even if Artorius were to elevate the concepts of Frost Dragon and Dragon of the Emperor further to Winter Dragon and Dragon Emperor, he would still be unable to reach this level. A god! What's worse, a really powerful one. She also pours all her power into physical strength. She already reached this level. Artorius had never encountered any god before, so he couldn't make a direct comparison. Though, after the Age of Gods come to an end, gods would deteriorate into divine spirits. However, he was certain that his teacher, Scathatch, had reached a level of strength that was unimaginable. Artorius was secretly alarmed while Mordred, by his side, suppressed a groan. Upon hearing this sound, Artorius confirmed it's over. Mordred couldn't keep up with Scathicus' speed anymore. As a result, Scathicus' spear pierced her side, followed by her thigh, arm, shoulder, and collarbone. Since it was a dream, Scathatch held nothing back. All her attacks were aimed at vital spots. But, the reason they ultimately didn't hit the vital spots like head or heart was due to Mordred's constant evasion and blocking. Damn it! You bitch! Mordred's physical injuries visibly healed at a rapid pace, which brought a relieved expression to Scathicus' face. With such fast recovery speed, it was partly because of Mordred's good physical condition and partly because of their strong mental fortitude. From now on, there will be interesting punching bags to hit. Scathatch thought to herself, wanting to continue her enjoyable entertainment time. But in the next moment, "Little Mo!" Artorius called out to Mordred. Then, she clenched their teeth, seemingly reluctant. However, her body obediently followed the command and retreated alongside Artorius. As she backed away, Artorius spoke to Scathatch. "We give up, no more fighting." Realizing that continuing the fight would only result in becoming Scathicus' punching bag, Artorius, who had no inclination for masochism, made a decisive choice and chose to surrender, conceding half the battle. That won't do. However, Scathatch had no intention of letting her off so easily. "You've ignited my fire. You better take responsibility." Accompanied by somewhat ambiguous words, another round of terrifying and powerful attacks ensued, like a storm. The spear thrusts that Artorius and Mordred managed to evade left long trenches or enormous craters on the ground. The sword used for blocking the spears unleashed a terrifying force that made muscles and bones cry out in agony. Falling victim to it meant experiencing intense pain and gruesome wounds. The last godlike existence of this era, the strongest in Europe, as expected of God-Slayer. Artorius confirmed once again that the opponent they faced was such a monster. Afterward, Mordred was finally sent flying and fell to the ground, unable to rise again. Little Mo! Suddenly losing his ally, Artorius, amidst his alarm, also had his barely maintained defensive stance shattered. The last thing he remembered was Scathatch, wearing a pleased smile, delivering a swift and powerful kick. After that, came the abyss. Chapter 59, Teacher and Disciple. Fuck. Teacher really doesn't know how to hold back. After what felt like an eternity, Artorius opened his eyes once again, only to find himself lying on a soft velvet bed. Where am I? This is my castle. As Artorius muttered to himself, he heard Scathicus' voice beside him. Your castle. While Artorius continued his self-talk, he turned his head and saw Scathatch sitting by his bedside. Don't worry, the battle is over, and I've had a good stretch myself. You're safe now, at least for the time being. The purple-haired beauty smiled and spoke these words. Her tight-fitting armor had been replaced with a more luxurious attire adorned with velvet, exuding an air of elegance. She also wore a gold-trimmed veil on her head. It seemed that this was Scathicus' usual attire when not in combat. She looked stunning. Although Artorius already knew that Scathatch was a beautiful woman, seeing her like this made him feel a bit mesmerized, unable to contain his slight fascination. He couldn't help but be captivated by her from the depths of his heart. Of course, the previous gallant and agile Scathatch was also admirable. Her martial prowess and agile movements made one feel a sense of conquest or the desire to be conquered. But if Artorius were to offer his evaluation, the current mysterious and luxurious Scathatch was even better. She appeared softer, arousing a desire to explore her secrets and make her his own. Because, Artorius's true essence was not that of a warrior, but rather that of a ruler, leader, and conqueror. He preferred the enjoyment of manipulating and controlling a nation, a group, or an army over engaging in battles on the field or dueling against powerful warriors, knights, monsters, or demigods. To develop a country to prosper, to lead a group to become the top, to command an army to be invincible, this was Artorius's source of pleasure, the reason he felt happiness and saw life as so beautiful and the air as so fresh. Therefore, compared to female warriors, Artorius favored noble women. This taste wasn't something he acquired from a decadent, luxurious, and corrupt place like Rome, but rather something innate to him. Perhaps not entirely innate. After all, he grew up under the influence of his mother, Artoria. His mother Artoria as King Arthur was a noble, dignified, and refined ruler. She was unbeatable on the battlefield. When the sacredness of a ruler and constant victories in wars intertwined, she became the most powerful and influential person on Britain. She was also the person closest to Artorius by blood ties. So Artorius admired her, loved her. When he was still young, Artorius even thought of becoming like her in response to her mother's earnest expectations. Of course, all of this turned into fleeting smoke as Artorius matured. Ideas from his childhood, even the things he dedicated his utmost effort to and considered as life goals, proved unworthy in hindsight. Surely, everyone must have experienced such things. However, the taste that was gradually cultivated from childhood did not change with the passage of time. Presently, Artorius still preferred noble women, ladies, queens, or princesses over female warriors, female knights, or valkyries. Of course, there were exceptions. After all, Artorius was also quite lustful. I always feel like you're thinking something impolite, my disciple. It's just your illusion, teacher. Facing Scathicus' furrowed brow, Artorius didn't hesitate to choose to lie. He maintained a poker face and asked, "So, what's the current situation? Did you capture me to keep me as a pet because I satisfied your desire for battle?" Artorius asked while maintaining a relaxed demeanor. "It's not just you in fact." Little mo2 Artorius couldn't help but roll his eyes. "I didn't expect your taste to be so wicked, teacher." "That. It doesn't matter." Artorius interrupted, jumping off the bed. He checked his body briefly to confirm that nothing unusual had happened, then he breathed a sigh of relief. "Good grief, you didn't take advantage of me while I was unconscious." This time it was Scathicus' turn to roll her eyes. Of course, a beauty is a beauty. Even when rolling her eyes, she still appeared charming and alluring. "We are still in the dreamland," Scathatch said. "No, I should say you two are still in the dreamland. So, don't worry, there won't be any side effects. I have also adjusted the flow of time between the land of shadows and the real world." And finally, as Scathatch said this, she approached Artorius. Although Artorius had a strong will since his journey in Europe, he couldn't help but feel nervous when Scathatch got closer. When she cupped his face and leaned in very, very close as if she was about to kiss him in the next second, he found himself blushing and his heartbeat slightly quickening. "Ha, so cute." Scathatch commented, "You're cute when you imitate adults as a child. But after seeing you imitate adults so often, suddenly seeing you behave like a normal child makes that cute feeling double." "You mean Gapmo?" "I get it, fuck." Artorius wanted to say that but realized he couldn't because Scathatch was holding his face, preventing him from opening his mouth. "Now listen carefully, Artorius Pendragon." Scathatch looked at him earnestly. "Let's repeat the previous contract, my dear disciple. I will push you to your limits with all my might. At the same time, I promise you that we will face that problem concerning the world thing together. I will also help you usurp fate. You believe you've struck gold, don't you? You believe you've struck gold because you feel you've gained too much, leading to uncertainty and a lack of confidence. You feel unreal and feel all of these are too good to be true, even with safeguards like Geis. Because you know, for someone like me who skillfully wields the primordial rune, that kind of thing like contracts or Geis is trash that can be played with by me anytime, anywhere. It's not reliable at all. Am I right?" For a moment, Artorius actually thought he was done for. He feared that he would either be eliminated by her violent outburst or find some other way to make his life a chaotic mess. He'd become nothing more than her pawn. But surprisingly, Scathatch didn't do that. "What I want to tell you is," Scathatch happily said to Artorius, "I've already obtained what I wanted." Chapter 60, Training. After saying those words, Scathatch released her grip on Artorius's face, stood up, and walked towards the room's exit. "You're more interesting than all the disciples I've taught," Scathatch said calmly as she walked away, her back turned to Artorius. "And you have stronger desires than any of the disciples I've taught. A lot will happen between us. So for now, at least, you can rest assured that I won't kill you." Before Artorius could respond or say anything in reply to Scathatch, she had already reached the door of the room. "Let's leave it at that, that child will wake up soon. Have you thought about how to comfort her?" After Scathatch said these words, Artorius heard a cry of "Ah!" from the neighboring room. That voice, even if he were deaf, he would recognize it. It was his beloved sister, Mordred. The surprise in her cry was likely due to awakening after being defeated by Scathatch. On the other hand, it could also be the fear she felt upon waking up and finding her dear big brother not by her side. Next came the sound of hurried footsteps and the opening of the door. Mordred rushed in at full speed. In the process, Scathatch, who had just been blocking the doorway, naturally stepped aside, making way for Mordred to reach Artorius unhindered. Brother! Brother, brother, brother! It's okay, dear, it's okay. Artorius gently stroked Mordred's hair as he comforted her. Mordred didn't know Scathatch well. This was their first interaction. So when Mordred was defeated by her, she had a lot of negative emotions in her heart. She couldn't help but feel fear. Fear of death, like any ordinary person. But, what she feared the most was the loss of Artorius's life. So now, Mordred was experiencing psychological trauma. The reason Scathatch didn't stop her or make any comments was that she had been there before and understood the situation. For Mordred, what she needed most was the warm and broad embrace of Artorius Pendragon, whom she trusted and liked as a pillar of her life. Just as they thought, after being comforted by Artorius for a while, Mordred finally calmed down. What's the situation now? She returned to her Artorius's #1 loyal dog state, being extremely obedient. It was the kind of obedience where if her brother said go east, she would go east, if her brother said go west, she would go west. The kind of obedience where she would betray anyone if her brother wished for it. And now, she asked Artorius about the current situation. After Artorius told her the information he had obtained from Scathatch, Mordred nodded seriously and said, "Understood." And didn't say anything else. She still had that look of worshipping her brother. "That's how it is," Artorius said, looking at Scathatch. "I'll leave the next 7 days to you, teacher." "Sure." Scathatch nodded. Then she looked at Mordred and then at Artorius. "Treat that child well, you rascal." "Of course." Artorius ruffled Mordred's hair. "She's my sister, after all. Who should I treat well if not her?" Scathatch originally wanted to say something else, but looking at Artorius's cheerful smile, she couldn't find the words. After thinking for a moment, Scathatch decided to give up. After all, she wouldn't be the one to suffer the pain. Consider it a lesson for her self-proclaimed talented disciple. And so, the training journey of Artorius and Mordred began. They left the Black Castle that resembled an inverse version of the White Castle of Camelot and arrived at the open space in front of the castle. There was various training equipment available here. Some Artorius could understand, while others were beyond his comprehension. These were probably the remnants of the hero training from the glorious era of the Land of Shadows. This place used to be a training ground back then. However, as the Age of Gods receded, the Land of Shadows became an inaccessible realm, and the training ground fell into decline. In dreams, basic training doesn't manifest in the physical body. Scathatch changed into her usual female warrior form-fitting bodysuit. Amid Artorius's silent admiration, she used her spear as a teaching whip, pointing and instructing him and Mordred. "Fortunately, both of you have a good physique. Just remember to keep exercising what you learn here in the future." "What exactly are you going to teach us then?" Mordred always seemed a bit rebellious when dealing with people other than Artorius. Hearing Scathatch's words, she grumbled discontentedly. "It's techniques, skills, and experience. And of course, magecraft." As she said this, Scathatch looked at Artorius. As one of the top mages of this era, Scathatch could naturally tell that Artorius excelled in enhancement magecraft. This was similar to Scathatch herself. She used rune in the past to enhance her own abilities. Of course, teachers favored clever disciples. But more than clever disciples, teachers preferred disciples who resembled themselves. Artorius happened to meet both criteria, so it was foreseeable that Scathatch would be especially strict in teaching him. With that said, Scathatch tossed 2 Gebolg spears to Artorius and Mordred, one for each. "Aren't you a dual wielder?" Mordred asked, inquiring further, "Why are you teaching us to use only one spear?" "Because it's the foundation," Scathatch answered. "You both usually fight with swords, right?" "Sometimes we use lance though," Mordred replied. "Yes, as knights, how could they not learn spearmanship, though what they usually used was lances, but it's still the same, right? It's just that Artorius possessed the magic sword Clarent, and Mordred was a die-hard fan of his older brother, which is why they primarily used swords. They are different. The techniques of wielding a lance and a spear are not the same. The former emphasizes coordination with the warhorse and swift thrusts, while the latter focuses on agility and versatility. In any case, with me, you must start from scratch. TCH. Mordred grumbled, seemingly not too happy. But she obediently complied. After all, Mordred doesn't want to suffer consequences if not obey this woman. With talents of mine and my brother, we can learn all her spear techniques in a very short time, right? Then we can seek revenge. Humph. Just wait, you old hag. We'll make you pay. Feeling that Mordred's state of mind was a bit odd, Artorius turned his head slightly and glanced at her. Confirming that she was thinking about some nonsense about Scathatch, he gave a pleading look to Scathatch, pleading mercy on Mordred's behalf. Scathatch smiled gently and nodded, granting Artorius's request. In the following training, she became even stricter with Mordred. Chapter 61, Spearmanship, I. The basics of spearmanship first, thrust. The position, angle, and force of the thrust are the key. Pay attention to the key points of my movements, the way I exert force, and the techniques. As Scathatch spoke, she swung her gi-balg, demonstrating the moves in front of Artorius and Mordred. First, she showcased them with a wooden humanoid target with markers around its body, executing the moves with utmost precision and speed. Her long spear was an extension of her arm, extremely precise. It swiftly rose, lowered, and made a series of rapid thrusts, piercing the markers on the humanoid target. Did you see that clearly? Just that? It's quite simple. I can do it too, Mordred replied nonchalantly, embracing an attitude of I don't acknowledge anyone except my brother and happily fooling around. Is that so? While saying this, Scathatch snapped her fingers, restoring the humanoid target to its original state. She took a step back, giving Mordred room to demonstrate. All right then, let's see what you've got. Mordred was brimming with confidence. She approached without hesitation. Of course, there's a difference between confidence and blind arrogance. Before actually making the move, she adjusted her body, wielded the spear, and felt the weight, length, and adaptability of the weapon. After performing a couple of techniques in place, she walked forward with full confidence. And then, in an instant, the markers on the humanoid target got pierced by her spear perfectly, or rather seemed like so. How was that, Teacher Scathatch? Mordred grinned and looked over, her eyes hinting at a hint of provocation. It's passable. Scathatch assessed. Just passable. Mordred furrowed her brow upon hearing Scathach's response. I obviously hit them like yours. Artorius. This time, Scathatch didn't respond directly but called out to Artorius. Explain it. Well, little Mo, Artorius approached with a smile, and with a snap of his fingers, the humanoid target that Scathatch had pierced reappeared right next to Mordred's target. Take a closer look, little Mo. Oh. Mordred wasn't a fool, on the contrary, she was quite clever. She hadn't realized it earlier because there was no physical reference. Combined with her confusion, she failed to grasp it. But now, prompted by Artorius, she immediately understood. Scathach's target and Mordred's target appeared almost identical at first glance, but upon closer inspection, there were clear differences. The round holes in Scathach's target were all the same size, with smooth edges where they passed through. While Mordred's target had different-sized round holes, with some edges containing wooden fragments and sharp edges within. It's about the technique of exerting force, the angle of the thrust, and. Mordred furrowed her brow, carefully contemplating the gap between herself and Scathatch. And it's also about will and spirit, little Mo. If it were before reincarnated, Artorius would never have mentioned these things. Instead, he would have been a stoic martial arts master with no emotions who used calculation and theory, perfectly integrating Euclidean and non-Euclidean geometry into his swordsmanship, making it easy to cut through opponents. Unfortunately, Type Moon is a world driven by ideology. Will and spirit truly have an impact. This was one of the reasons why Artorius felt he could not reach the pinnacle of martial arts. He didn't consider his will and spirit to be particularly ideological. Instead, he preferred to be adaptable, innovative, and calculating. He found it hard to imagine sacrificing everything for something other than his mother, Artoria, and his sister, Mordred. Artorius had a strong desire for material possessions, his soul wasn't noble. He couldn't reach the level of sacrificing everything for certain things. Artorius was self-aware, he had always confirmed that he was a leader, a schemer, but not a hero. Even if you say that, I still. Upon hearing Artorius's words, Mordred didn't have an epiphany but furrowed her brow. It seemed that will and spirit were also quite challenging for her. Well, then watch carefully. This time, it was Scathicus' turn to teach, though she didn't use words or written expressions. Instead, she opted for something more direct. Mordred, stand still and watch my moves. As she spoke, Scathatch swung her spear and thrust it toward Mordred. Mordred. Instinctively, she tried to dodge or block, but her body couldn't move. Scathicus' magecraft had bound Mordred's body. Am I done for? As Mordred couldn't help but think this, Scathatch retracted her spear. Although she could clearly feel the sensation of her skin touching the cold spear tip, not a single inch of her skin was damaged. Scathatch had mastered the control of force to the extent that it became an extension of her will. How far was she from achieving the so-called realm-breaking strike? Don't space out, pay attention. While Mordred was surprised while thinking, wow, I'm not dead after all, Scathatch loudly shouted at her, snapping Mordred out of her reverie. Then she began to watch attentively. Viewing the situation from a third-person perspective felt different from the first-person perspective. What mattered even more was the angle and perspective from which she observed the situation during intense danger and the desperate effort to concentrate. I see now, I see it. So that's how it is. This woman is amazing, no wonder I couldn't beat her. As Mordred watched Scathicus' attacks, she entered a state of focus, even forgetting her fear. She single-mindedly paid attention to Scathicus' techniques, memorizing everything. Only after Scathatch withdrew her spear and released Mordred from the immobilization spell did Mordred fall to the ground. Physically unexhausted, but mentally weary. Have you learned it? Yes, teacher. This time, Mordred willingly called her teacher and was not felt forced like before. Unlike Mordred in another timeline, who didn't receive recognition from her father, resulting in her stubborn and difficult personality like annoying Tsundere, the Mordred in this moment was cheerful and bright. Omu. Scathatch nodded and then looked at Artorius. I won't need it, right, teacher? Before she could speak, Artorius rejected her with a playful smile, but unfortunately, this act of skipping class did not gain Scathicus' approval. In the next second, he was also immobilized by Scathatch, experiencing a storm of spear thrusts. Only after a round of attacks was complete did Scathatch release Artorius. Signaling the end of this lesson, he fell to the ground next to Mordred. That's it for this lesson. Take a break, then start practicing on your own. I'll come to assess you in an hour. After saying these words, Scathatch turned and walked away. Chapter 62, Spearmanship, 2. How's it going, little Mo? How do you feel? Artorius, who was still lying there, calmly asked Mordred. It's really powerful. Mordred responded with a tinge of emotion. If we're talking about physical abilities alone, I'm confident I won't lose to her by much. But when it comes to technique, the gap is quite wide. No wonder even when we fight her together, we couldn't defeat her. She truly lives up to the legend. Yeah, I agree. Artorius nodded, confirming that Mordred was not mistaken. However, Mordred continued, jumping up and appearing revitalized, I won't just give up like that. I will learn everything she taught and surpass her. I'll become a warrior even stronger than Scathatch, because that's the only way to live up to the title of brother's protector. Little Mo. Artorius watched his sister's radiant smile and felt a slight surge of excitement in his heart. She's really my sister, so adorable, so brilliant. Omu, I must cherish and love her properly. At the same time, back at the castle's upper level, Scathatch looked through the window and wore a joyful smile. I don't dislike such a child, she said, referring to Mordred. Both Mordred and her brother had successfully passed Scathicus' assessment and adeptly grasped the crucial thrust aspect of the foundational spearmanship during an hour of training. After that, they learned other techniques such as parry, disarm, and entangle. It took Scathatch a day to teach the basic foundations of spearmanship and all the fundamental moves to Artorius and Mordred, not merely informing them but guiding the Pendragon siblings to master all of that foundational spear techniques to the utmost level. Without Scathicus' instruction, Mordred could still be able to effortlessly thrust using a spear like before. However, this instruction aimed to push the Pendragon siblings to their limits in mastering these foundational spear techniques. Now, their utilization of these moves had reached a level of perfection, though this perfection was limited by Artorius and Mordred's own strength, intelligence, and understanding, rather than the technique's inherent limits themselves. Nonetheless, it was still commendable. In the past, it took me a day to teach my best disciple these things. Scathatch thought, their talent is no less than that guy's. She felt even more satisfied with her disciples. And so, the first day of training was complete. After flawlessly blocking thousands of spears with his move called guard, Artorius earned a nod of approval from Scathatch. At the same time, both he and Mordred had reached their limits. Although their bodies didn't tire in the dreamland, the mental exhaustion from the exertion still left them feeling weary. "Let's rest now," Scathatch said. "Take 3 hours off and come back here for the second session." The reason they weren't given time for sleep was that Artorius and Mordred were already asleep. Even if they were to sleep more, it wouldn't provide additional mental recovery. Ah! As Scathatch departed without hesitation, Mordred swayed her body and leaned against Artorius's shoulder. "I'm so tired, big brother." The adorable sister half playfully and half seriously coaxed Artorius, saying, "I can't walk anymore." Artorius understood Mordred's underlying message, of course. Whether it was "carry me on your back and hold me" or "wake me up with a kiss." Under normal circumstances, Artorius wouldn't refuse Mordred's small pleas. But today, Artorius had a better plan. "I see. In that case, let me take you somewhere that I'm sure you'll be satisfied with," Artorius said with a cheerful smile, and then, under Mordred's curious gaze, he took her hand. In the next moment, the scenery around them changed, and they appeared in a forest beside the holy spring. The air here was fresh, and the true ether was thick, creating a pleasant sensation for Mordred, who was a dragon. "So, where is this? Medb? Medb? Are you here?" As Mordred wanted to ask her big brother about their location, Artorius looked around but didn't see the pink-haired woman. After calling out a couple of times and still not seeing anyone. "She's not here, so it's not a problem," Artorius muttered to himself and then said to Mordred, "This is a hidden place I found in Ireland. If you take a bath here, you can quickly replenish your energy." "Really?" Mordred was very interested in this. "Really? Great. Let's give it a try." "Yeah, let's try it." So, they all tried it together. The effect was truly as Artorius had described. The mental exhaustion caused by their intense training was completely recovered. Mordred even felt that she could immediately dive back into training without needing to wait for 3 hours. "Then let's go directly to find Teacher Scathatch." Artorius was pleased to see Mordred so motivated for power. After all, the stronger she became, the greater the benefits for him. A certain silver-haired guy sitting on his plastic chair would also be delighted. Yet. Thus, the Pendragon siblings happily left the holy spring. After their figures disappeared, a certain pink-haired individual who had been hiding in the bushes carefully emerged. Her heart was filled with regret. Because the moment she sensed Artorius's presence, she felt like she was going to explode. After waiting for Artorius to call out, "Medb, are you here?" she quickly hid instead of responding. And then, she could only watch Artorius bring another woman and enjoy the holy spring that had originally belonged to her. Damn it! Does he think he owns this place? I am the true owner here. Everything here belongs to me, doesn't it? After Artorius and Mordred finished their enjoyment and happily left, Medb's inner regret reached its peak. Why did I hide anyway? I didn't do anything shameful. No, I did do something shameful, but Artorius doesn't know. So what am I afraid of if he doesn't know then? Damn it, damn it, damn it all. It's so damn frustrating. That rascal. I'll make him mine no matter what. She swore in her heart. Glug, 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 glug. And so, today, Her Majesty the Queen filled her belly with the holy spring's water, or rather bath water once again. Chapter 63, Not Ready. After returning to the castle, Artorius and Mordred found Scathatch. The training began once again, and it was a delightful experience. Their lives fell into a routine. Daily training. They pushed themselves to exhaustion and then headed to the holy spring for Medb to fill her stomach with bath water. Afterward, they returned to continue training. In addition to their spearmanship, they also studied magecraft. Artorius was thrilled to delve into Scathika's magic workshop. The magecraft classes were conducted separately. Mordred was not happy about this, but there was no other choice. Due to her poor foundation in magecraft, studying with Artorius was like a kindergartner attending high school classes. So while Scathatch instructed Artorius, Mordred continued practicing her spear techniques. It worked the other way around as well. This way, Scathatch had the opportunity to spend time alone with Artorius. Although it didn't serve much purpose at the moment, it might prove useful in the future. In the blink of an eye, the 7th day arrived, and Artorius and Mordred were about to awaken. At this moment, Mordred was diligently practicing spear techniques on the training grounds. In the span of 7 days, she had made significant progress. Not only did her spearmanship improve by leaps and bounds, but even her previously weak magecraft abilities also saw an improvement. Meanwhile, in Scathika's magic workshop, she thoroughly taught Artorius the first rune, which represented the concept and usage of wealth. Only 7 days, and you've completely mastered a rune. You truly have remarkable talent, Scathatch remarked while looking at Artorius, surrounded by a frost-colored rune. When it came to talent in spearmanship, among her disciples, there were perhaps 1 or 2 who could compare to Artorius. As for magecraft talent, there were also 1 or 2 individuals who could be mentioned. However, to possess both talents simultaneously at the highest level was unprecedented, with Artorius being the only one. This sense of destiny's calling made Scathatch hold him in even higher regard. "What is your so-called grand plan?" she asked earnestly, looking at Artorius. "It's about time you shared it with me." "You're quite impatient, teacher." Artorius smiled cheerfully, then continued, half-jokingly and half-seriously addressing Scathatch, "If my plan doesn't align with your intentions, what would you do, teacher? Or perhaps, if my plan surpasses your capabilities, what would you do?" As he spoke these words, he looked at Scathatch with a playful yet serious gaze. Unlike Merlin, Morgan, and Vivian, in Artorius's plan, Scathatch was crucial and irreplaceable. Her understanding and mastery of fate were profound. To usurp fate, her assistance was indispensable. On the other hand, Morgan, Merlin, and Vivian could be substituted or even absent. Therefore, when it came to Scathatch, Artorius was more cautious in his approach. Regarding what Scathatch said, "I've already obtained what I wanted from before," he analyzed and contemplated it earnestly. In the end, he reached a conclusion. What she wanted was the pleasure of teaching and nurturing someone. After all, she was a legendary teacher. There was a saying, "To obtain the world's talents and educate them is a triple delight." In other words, as long as she could educate an outstanding youth like Artorius, Scathatch would be all smiles. As a famous teacher in the Age of Gods, although she wasn't as outstanding and famous as Chiron, she definitely regarded children with an innate talent for teaching as a source of joy in her life. Not to mention, he was not just any ordinary youth, but an extraordinarily talented one. This point was something Artorius could confirm. As for the other things she wanted, Artorius could only rely on speculation. What did Scathatch want to gain from him? Or perhaps, Scathatch had already gained something from him. Emotions? Happiness? The thrill of battle? Or something else entirely? Surely it couldn't be love. Even someone as intelligent as Artorius couldn't know for sure because there were too few clues. So he needed to probe further, to delve deeper into Scathika's innermost thoughts. To unearth, acquire, and even control the secrets, emotions, and heart of this unparalleled and unique woman in the world. The best outcome would be to completely win over Scathatch, to make her obedient to him like Mordred. If that wasn't possible, at the very least, he needed to establish a strong and intimate relationship. A partner? A lover? Such a relationship might not be that solid for celts like them. What Artorius wanted was to become the supreme and sole figure in her heart. It didn't matter if it was brother and sister, mother and son, teacher and disciple, or lovers, any positive relationship would suffice. After all, Artorius had grand plans, and he needed to ensure that his plans would go off without a hitch. Using emotions to manipulate the other party was also one method. Although it didn't seem to be going smoothly at the moment. As he contemplated in this manner, he spoke probing words and looked at Scathatch, waiting for her response. How much you desire determines how much you must be prepared to sacrifice. Scathatch didn't directly answer his question. Instead, she said that sentence and then asked him. I am always prepared to engage in a war, even at the cost of my life. But what about you, Artorius? It's clear that you lack such determination, you're not ready. While Artorius remained silent, Scathatch answered for him. We will meet again. After Scathatch spoke those words, everything in front of Artorius became increasingly blurry until the next second. He regained consciousness, returning to his senses, lying inside the tent. A week is neither long nor short, and. What did she mean by you're not ready? Determination, hey? Artorius thought to himself, then turned his head to look at Mordred. The latter seemed to be a little more dazed than him, as if not fully awakened from the dream. Little Mo, snap out of it. Brother. Oh. Mordred looked at Artorius with a silly expression for a while before finally coming to her senses. Land of Shadows, Scat Hatch, training. Thinking of this, Mordred jumped up in an instant and quickly put on her clothes, rushing outside. Little Mo. I'm going to test it out. Once Artorius also dressed and walked out of the tent, he would understand what Mordred's test it out meant. It was spearmanship. Mordred casually picked up a spear from the camp and effortlessly wielded it, smoothly executing techniques and moves with ease. Although the techniques were simple and not varied, they gave off a sense of power, fear, and even an unstoppable aura. It's not a dream after all. My spearmanship has really improved. Feeling simple happiness from this, she revealed a brilliant smile under the sunlight. How wonderful, with an increase in strength, I can better assist my brother. Thinking of such things, Mordred felt extremely happy, as if she were a contented little kitten after being thoroughly petted. After receiving Artorius's promise, we will continue to head to the Land of Shadows and receive training from teacher Scat Hatch. Mordred once again made a firm resolution to learn earnestly and respond to her big brother's trust and affection. This joy continued until the afternoon. Their group finally returned to their home, the White City shining under the sun, Camelot. Chapter 64, Homecoming. He's back. In the highest room of the White Castle, Artoria looked through the window and saw her beloved son advancing slowly with his cavalry. In Camelot, a guard of honor that had been waiting for a long time finally gathered and accompanied their governor, general, and leader of the Germanic army, for a show of power. It felt a bit like a triumphant return. Artorius had been away for 2 years, and being a materialistic person, he couldn't simply return without any pomp. It was only natural for him to make a stylish comeback. The so-called Guard of Honor originated from the Germanic military region and was known as the Dragon Sentinel. It served as Artorius's most elite force. Their origins were complex, comprising knights from Britain, veteran heroes from Rome or Germanic tribes, and even some nomadic people from the Far East, such as the Huns, Alans, and Alvars. Every warrior who could join the Dragon Sentinel was handpicked by Artorius himself. They had to excel in horsemanship and possess exceptional combat skills, specializing in spears, swords, bows, and javelins. After being selected, Artorius personally trained them, taught them, and provided them with generous salaries, land, the best weapons, and treatment. This was one of the mightiest forces under Artorius's command. Due to the constraints of the era and the monopoly of knowledge and tradition, Artorius had to select a portion of his elite group's members from the nobles in order to establish the empire he intended to build. However, this was not something that could be resolved in a short period of time. Each of Artorius's guards rode on equally tall pure white warhorses. These warhorses were specifically collected by him and possessed bloodlines of phantasmal species. Each one was remarkably swift, able to continue fighting tirelessly even while clad in heavy magic plate armor, running for days without tiring. The guards also wore valuable magic plate armor, their weapons shimmering with magical light. Dragon Sentinel, bearing flags of the Red Dragon, Black Eagle, and White Wolf, numbered a total of 400. This number exceeded that of the Knights of the Round Table. In terms of top-notch experts, Dragon Sentinel cannot match the Knights of the Round Table. However, in terms of overall quantity, this group of warriors is the strongest of their time. In this regard, even the Knights of the Round Table, consisting mostly of Gauls with a few selected warriors from the British Isles, couldn't compare to them. But if I could bring the heroes of the Knights of the Round Table under my control, it would be even better. Riding at the forefront were Mordred and Gareth, who had just arrived and joined him, with Galahad guarding the middle, while Artorius himself was busy pondering. In this era, Britain was fated to become extinct, yet it seemingly had the favor of fate. Was it merely a coincidence? Heroes abounded in this era of Britain. The top 12 of the Knights of the Round Table, except for Kay, were all exceptional warriors. Among them, the outstanding ones were also prominent among the heroic spirits. This was something that even the mighty Rome couldn't match. What a waste of such power, squandered by the king, consumed in the meaningless search for the Holy Grail. Percival, Tristan, Lancelot, Gawain, Bedivere, Lamorak. These knights who possessed extraordinary combat prowess or made remarkable contributions in other aspects embarked on journeys with no results due to the king's stubbornness. Moreover, even worse was the fact that among the knights of the Round Table who followed Artorius, the will of King Arthur also spread. Lancelot, who played an important role in Artorius's strategy on the continent, used his army's power to assist the knights in their quest for the Holy Grail. These forces and resources should have been used to conquer Rome. What bothered Artorius even more was Galahad, who stood by his side. On the road to the Camelot, Artorius had a final conversation with his best friend. Unlike Mordred, who wholeheartedly supported Artorius, or Gareth, who saw herself as a knight of Artorius, Galahad had exceptional abilities and potential surpassing even Lancelot, making Artorius consider him a talent. However, Galahad was deeply influenced by King Arthur. Although Galahad considered himself to be Artorius's friend and promised to help him in his endeavour, Galahad still believed himself to be a knight of King Arthur. Therefore, after their usual meeting, he proposed to Artorius, "I plan to temporarily leave the Germanic army and travel to various parts of Europe to search for the Holy Grail." Artorius neither agreed nor opposed. Observing Galahad's serious expression, he knew that convincing him would be difficult. So he decided to use a delaying tactic. "Don't say that, Galahad," Artorius replied, "let's discuss your departure after we finish our current tasks." "All right." Upon hearing Artorius's response, Galahad hesitated. He wanted to say more, but he remained silent. Perhaps he was concerned, or even afraid. Afraid that Artorius would persuade him to stay, making it difficult for him to refuse. As an important member of the Germanic military region, responsible for the region's daily administrative work, his position was equivalent to that of a half-prime minister, making him the top figure in the civil service system. His status was almost on par with Mordred, the foremost figure in the military system. For a figure like him to leave, it would be like an earthquake in the Germanic region. It couldn't be decided casually, no matter what. But after that, if Artorius, His Highness refuses, can I really leave? Galahad expressed doubt about this. He knew deep in his heart the truth about his best friend, the lord and ruler he was currently serving, and the future that awaited him, a ruler whose dark side was concealed beneath the radiant sunlight. The brighter the sunlight, the denser the shadows became. The purer the frost, the darker the earth beneath the snow. That was Artorius, a powerful and enigmatic ruler who couldn't be judged simply as good or bad. "I understand." Following that, Galahad expressed his obedience. Chapter 65, Reunion. On top of the city walls, Artoria pondered for a moment and made a decision. Although it was inappropriate and went against her royal status, she decided to personally leave the city and welcome her dearest son. However, surprisingly, besides Queen Guinevere and the witch, Morgan Le Fay, there was not a single important figure on Artoria's side. In its heyday, the Knights of the Round Table, with 300 knights, now dwindled to only 20 knights and a handful of guards. The other knights either acted in Artoria's name to intervene and maintain balance throughout Britain or were engaged in the pursuit of the Holy Grail. Camelot appeared desolate, even the flag of the Red Dragon on the city walls drooped with a lackluster air. All of this seemed to foreshadow the decline of the Pendragon dynasty in Britain. With these thoughts in mind, Artorius felt a heavy heart. The title of a ruler of a fallen kingdom is not something to be proud of. As he contemplated, he dismounted. Initially, according to diplomatic etiquette, as the supreme leader of the Germanic army which was part of the Roman army, he should have maintained composure and even displayed arrogance when facing Artoria, the king of Britain, to showcase the greatness of the Roman Empire. But Artorius didn't care about such bullshit. When the gates of the castle swung open, and the drawbridge lowered, his father, Arthur, and his mother, Guinevere, walked out together, and Artorius eagerly approached them. "Father, mother." At least in that moment, Artorius was sincere. He greeted them first, then embraced and kissed them on the cheeks. "I missed you both." Seeing his son, who had grown into a handsome young man surpassing herself in stature, Artoria also showed an excited expression. For that brief moment, she forgot the fear of Britain's impending doom, her immense responsibility, overwhelming pressure, and profound sense of helplessness. She simply immersed herself in the joy of being reunited with her beloved child. Artoria embraced her own child and felt the change in their physical positions. She couldn't help but feel a bit saddened. Previously, she could rest her head on top of Artorius's, but now she could only lean against his chest. The sword of selection, Caliban, had already shattered. However, Excalibur as the superior existence to Caliban, remained under her control. This meant that her body remained unchanged, just as it was before, at the age of 15, without the slightest alteration. In terms of height, Artorius had surpassed her already. If he continues to grow, there may come a time when I won't be able to match Artorius's embrace anymore. Artoria lightly kissed the side of Artorius's face, unable to resist such thoughts. Ahem, ahem. Perhaps feeling that Artorius and Artoria's embrace lasted too long and the scene was too heartwarming, Morgan, who was nearby, felt as uncomfortable as if she had swallowed dozens of pounds of highly concentrated lemons. She couldn't help but cough lightly a few times to draw their attention to the situation. However, she was completely ignored. Whether it was Artorius or Artoria, they continued to enjoy the pleasures of family life in their own ways, to compensate for the longing of not seeing each other for 2 years. Morgan, who was beside them, felt as if she had consumed a mixture of grape, lemon, orange, plum, sour pear, and green apple juice. The sound of teeth grinding against each other echoed. Father and son ignored her presence, treating her as if she were invisible. "These years have been tough on you, father," Artorius said to Artoria with a nostalgic tone. "You too." Artoria sighed, responding to his words. Setting aside their differing views on each other's actions, they both knew the hardships they had endured in these 2 years. Artorius suffered physically. Conquering and governing were not tasks that could be easily accomplished. Though Artorius had a strong materialistic desire, he had not yet fallen into depravity, at least not at present. He dedicated the majority of his time to his work. 18 hours a day working, 5 hours for exercise, 1 hour of rest. Fortunately, being a dragon allowed him to handle such a lifestyle, otherwise, he would have died from overexertion long ago. Artoria, on the other hand, was burdened with mental fatigue. In the fragmented state of Britain, with no wars or external pressures, there were very few matters in which she could intervene. Camelot was merely a small domain with a crude management style and methods. The king had few daily administrative tasks to handle. However, the pressure was immense. The rise and fall of Britain rested on her shoulders. The pressure she had to endure in a chaotic world without hope was unimaginable. What made Artorius feel somewhat saddened was that he had also become a source of pressure for her. Whenever Artorius created a magnificent war and achievement in Europe, Artoria would feel that it was her responsibility. Fortunately, everything can still be salvaged. As Artoria looked at her beloved son with deep respect, this was what she thought in her heart. Despite all the changes, Artorius's love for her had not wavered, giving Artoria a sense of illusion of she could persuade him to turn back. Unfortunately, all of this must continue. As Artorius looked at his loving father, he sighed inwardly. Artoria remained the same as always, a naive and a cutie. He wondered whether it was her education and way of thinking that confined her thoughts or if, on the day she drew the sword of selection, her mind stopped growing just like her body. In any case, she hadn't changed at all. In the face of reality, the warm scene of a father and son had overshadowed everything. Except for those directly involved, no one else seemed to notice. Guinevere, in particular, looked on with satisfaction. On the other side, Morgan gritted her teeth, secretly relishing the pleasure of being ignored and feeling cheated, or rather, experiencing the sensation of being cooped. If Artorius knew what she was thinking, he would surely hold her in contempt. After all, everyone else was focused on serious matters, while she was off in her own world. In this scenario, it wouldn't really be a problem to say that Morgan was kind of a loser. After all, she always misunderstood anything and thought about nonsense. Such were the various thoughts of the Pendragon. But, the knights also had their own thoughts. Behind Artorius, Gareth was moved by the affection between father and son. Mordred felt a hint of envy, while Galahad, the sensitive young man, sensed that something was amiss. Is it really impossible to bridge the gap between the king and his highness? His mood grew increasingly heavy. Chapter 66, Banquet Dinner. The reunion dinner at Camelot was a disappointment. Even though Artorius was welcomed back to the palace, Artoria couldn't offer anything decent to treat the honored guests. In Camelot, the only thing available in unlimited supply was the unappealing black bread, a product of magecraft. It had no advantages except for its large quantity, and it was as hard as a rock, dry and overly coarse. One would worry about developing esophageal cancer from eating too much of it. No one in the whole world enjoyed eating such a thing, except for Artoria herself. But suddenly, Artorius heard his mother saying, "To be honest, I'm starting to get tired of this thing after eating it so much." Upon hearing these words, Artorius looked at his mother with extreme shock, causing her to feel a bit embarrassed. "What's wrong, father? Is there something you don't want to eat or a problem?" Artoria then deliberately tried to appear imposing, wanting to suppress and stop Artorius from questioning her, but her efforts were ineffective due to his overwhelming astonishment. It was evident that treating guests with something Artoria the king herself grew tired of eating was akin to severing ties with the entire world. Fortunately, the king had a good son. Artorius had long anticipated this awkward situation and simply clapped his hands. The chefs and waiters, who were prepared in advance, began bringing in dishes one after another, quickly setting up a table. There were dishes like roasted suckling pig, roasted whole lamb, and braised beef, tough and substantial dishes. There were also next-generation Western cuisines such as foie gras, caviar, truffles, and lobster. The table was filled with pies, apple tarts, cakes, and candies, representing next-generation pastries. Various fruit juices and wines were available as well. In order to cater to everyone's tastes, Artorius even presented traditional extravagant dishes like roasted swan, roasted peacock, and roasted dolphin. He made sure to fulfill every guest's desires. As Artoria saw the table filled with a feast that perfectly met the standards of a king, her expression grew increasingly serious, even as she desperately swallowed her saliva. Her gaze towards Artorius became stricter and more severe. "Artorius! What's the matter, father?" Artorius smiled gently, seemingly oblivious to her anger and dissatisfaction. "Oh my dear father, I know you're a glutton through and through. Why, this is too extravagant." The only consolation for Artorius was that Artoria dragged him to a corner before speaking with him, minimizing the impact of the situation. To some extent, it could be considered an attempt to hide the obvious. Those carefree individuals could easily dismiss it, but for the more perceptive ones, Artoria's actions garnered even greater attention. Take Mordred, for example, who had been closely watching Artorius and Artoria. Despite having delicious food in front of her, she paid no attention. Or Galahad, who had just discussed slightly sensitive topics with Artorius and was now feeling uneasy in his heart. And Morgan, and Guinevere. Well, among the people present in Camelot, all the important figures noticed their conversation. This is too extravagant. Why invest so many resources into hosting a banquet? Because that way, everyone will be happy. Facing the earnest questioning, Artorius assumed an air of nonchalance and replied naturally, causing a momentary pause for Artoria. She didn't expect Artorius to respond like this. Before this, whenever she educated her son, he always appeared attentive, obedient, and well-behaved. Of course, she didn't know that it was all a facade, a way to lower her guard. How could everyone be happy? Despite her efforts to suppress her anger, Artoria's tone unintentionally rose. The people are suffering from hunger. Even though we have changed policies, reclaimed new lands, and implemented new agricultural measures, the issue of food shortage in Britain remains unresolved due to weather problems. While the people can't even have a satisfying meal, we're here hosting a grand feast, indulging in luxury. This is not right. Father. Artorius lowered his voice slightly, "Please calm down. Everyone is watching." Upon hearing his words, Artoria, feeling a bit flustered, glanced around. As expected, her loud voice caught the attention of many people, who unconsciously looked over. "Can't it wait until after the banquet, father?" Artoria. Having become the mood spoiler, she glared at Artorius, who, in turn, tried to soothe her like a cat whose fur had been ruffled, with a gentle and helpless smile. In the end, she reluctantly gave in, not really surrendering, just temporarily compromising. She suppressed her temper and anger, saving them for later, after the banquet. With this thought in mind, she ate and ate, desperately. While everyone joyfully indulged in the delicious delicacies brought by Artorius, Artoria fought to devour bread. The kind mentioned before, the hard black bread that made a sound when bitten. Surrounded by fragrant and sweet aromas, everyone was delighted. Only Artoria suffered. It seemed as if everyone was ganging up on her. This peculiarity did not go unnoticed, and the joyful atmosphere was dampened considerably. Many people still felt quite awkward, and their voices became subdued. "My king." Appearing next to Artoria during this moment, gently persuading her, was none other than Queen Guinevere. She approached Artoria with a plate of the meat she loved the most. "Just have a little bite." The roasted meat emitted an enticing aroma. In addition to the savory scent, there was a hint of spices. It was a delicacy that Artoria had never tasted before. Salivating. She salivated heavily. No, I can't. However, even though Artoria desperately wanted to eat, even to the point of wanting to gnaw on the plate itself, she couldn't. It's a matter of principle. I won't eat these things. She firmly expressed her position. As a result, the atmosphere throughout the entire banquet remained rather peculiar. What a foolish little sister! At the same time, Morgan, savoring a strawberry cake, thought merrily. After observing all of Artoria's actions, she couldn't help but feel a sense of frustration, thinking, now that I think about it, how could I lose to such a fool? She continued, also this little rascal, after not seeing him for a few days, has become even more delicious. Turning her head, Morgan looked at Artorius and couldn't help but think joyfully. With elegance, she used her knife and fork to cut the small pastry in front of her, made with honey, cream, a soft cake base, and strawberries, into small pieces, and put them in her mouth sensually. Mmm. She let out a satisfied sigh as if she had finally achieved her wish and had Artorius in the palm of her hand. Chapter 67, Argument, I. The banquet came to an unpleasant end. Artorius's guards were settled in the military camp at Camelot. The knights each had their own rooms to rest, so there was no need to worry. After everything was arranged, Artoria, who was eagerly waiting, hurriedly led her beloved son toward her study. My king! Artorius, hopefully everything is all right. Seeing this scene, Guinevere, as the queen, felt deeply uneasy. She was not alone in feeling this way. Many of the Camelot soldiers, officials, and a few remaining knights of the Round Table present also shared the same sentiments. Apart from feeling uneasy, they also felt guilty and remorseful. During the banquet just now, King Arthur suppressed his desires and forced himself to eat the black bread. However, they couldn't help but indulge themselves to some extent by partaking in the delicious delicacies brought by the prince. This made them feel as though they had betrayed their king. As Queen Guinevere went to persuade the king with the roasted meat, everyone watched, their hearts filled with complex emotions. If the king accepted the roasted meat, they would be able to indulge in it without any sense of guilt. Honestly, they had been enduring hardships alongside the king for many years. Ever since the king took the throne and launched the counterattack against the Saxons, they had been eating black bread every day. And even now, they were still eating it. Occasionally, there would be some dried meat, vegetables, or fish, which could barely be considered an additional meal, especially during wartime or when they were on the march, where they could at least do some hunting. However, in recent years, the situation has worsened. Seeing the land in Britain deteriorate, the king set an example by leading everyone to tighten their belts. They only ate 2 meals a day, and each meal consisted of hard and magecraft-made black bread. Such a frugal lifestyle was becoming unbearable for many. If everyone had to endure this frugality, it would be manageable. However, everyone knew that the soldiers and knights who followed the prince to Europe were treated well. As long as they worked hard and had abilities, even a lowly commoner without any status could become someone important. With such a stark contrast, continuing to endure a frugal life in Britain was already a sufficient demonstration of their loyalty to the king. But occasionally, just occasionally, indulging once and enjoying something good to eat wouldn't be a problem, right? That's why they were concerned about the king. When they saw him refuse the queen's persuasion, they felt helpless on one hand, but on the other hand, they were also a little pleased. The king remained the same upright and honest king, not bowing down or compromising in the face of temptation. However, the king's righteousness and honesty seemed to have gone too far. In the span of just one meal, the mindset of many who remained at Camelot underwent subtle changes. Some admired the king even more and reaffirmed their belief in continuing to stand by him. More people felt frustrated, disappointed, and even a sense of disgust. Subconsciously, they felt that what the king had done was not right. Therefore, they developed a disdain towards the king for not responding to their emotions. Some even had the desire to leave him and join Artorius. Oh, the complexities of human nature, they truly are hard to understand. Artoria was completely unaware of this. What on earth is going on? Why would you do this? Artoria sternly questioned Artorius, hoping to ignite a sense of shame within him. The people can't even have a decent meal, and here we are feasting. What kind of message does that send? Things didn't go as Artoria had imagined. Artorius didn't pretend to be obedient. Instead, he chose to confront her head-on. Because it's a day worth celebrating. Artorius replied in a relaxed tone. The soldiers have been eating plain bread for so long, so what's wrong with giving them something better once in a while? But... Oh, don't worry, Artorius smirked. As a benefit of my return to Camelot, I've distributed bread and salt to every person in Camelot, and every household has received smoked meat. The men even get a cup of beer as a gift. Everyone is quite pleased. Artoria looked at Artorius in surprise, realizing that she didn't sound as righteous as she thought she did. However, even so, she still believed that he had done something wrong. Even if that's the case, our banquet should still be more modest. No. Artorius decisively rejected her words. Does father think it's fair for everyone to eat the same food and endure the same hardships? Does father believe it's unjust that soldiers, knights, and even we enjoyed a lavish banquet earlier, while commoners were only given bread, salt, smoked meat, and beer? Isn't it? In my opinion, it's the opposite. Artorius said. Those who work harder should receive more. Blindly adhering to egalitarianism is the real unfairness. Treating soldiers and knights, who bear heavier responsibilities, the same as commoners when it comes to food and clothing, that's tyranny. How is that possible? Artorius's words surprised and puzzled Artoria. But this is a time of great need. She instinctively wanted to argue with Artorius, but after weighing the arguments of those who work harder should receive more and egalitarianism, she realized she might not gain many advantages. Although she firmly believed she was right. But, like a certain auburn-haired boy had said, just because you're correct doesn't mean you're right. Even among the knights of the Round Table, there were many who pursued material desires. When she asked everyone to tighten their belts and allocate resources to aid the people, there were heated debates within the Round Table. Some couldn't bear it from the beginning. Some couldn't bear it after persisting for a while. Except for herself, perhaps only Guinevere, her closest friend, could maintain a life of austerity and give almost all resources to the people. Let's leave this matter aside for now. Artoria reluctantly said to Artorius. Artorius, there are many things I want to talk to you about. Yes, father. I also have many things I want to discuss with you. The tension between mother and son gradually subsided. After all, they were family, and even if they had conflicts, they could be reconciled, or so they thought. But that wasn't the case. After the discussions of egalitarianism, sharing hardships, and rewarding hard work, Artorius began to propose to his mother that the treatment of Camelot's military should be improved, no matter what. It's okay for the officials of Camelot to skim off some benefits, but the military must not be deprived. This is the foundation of Camelot, father. Artorius earnestly pleaded, genuinely wanting what was best for his mother. However, she appeared clueless, unable to comprehend his intentions or the importance of bribing and buying off the military. Isn't sharing the honor with them enough? But honor doesn't fill their stomachs. Don't they have black bread? It's not enough. Artorius sighed tiredly. Chapter 68, Argument, 2. All right. I admit that everyone has been working hard. Artoria nodded and began with her usual talk, but it's not a problem as long as we find the Holy Grail. That's the problem. If we continue like this, merely waiting for the Holy Grail to be found, our Pendragon dynasty will be doomed. Lamented Artorius helplessly, his gaze fixed on his mother. Father, do you know what is most important in such difficult times? Asked Artorius. The people, of course. Replied Artoria naturally. No, you're wrong. It's the army, the power, the strength, father. Artorius replied with a heavy heart. Artoria fell silent, contemplating his words. Artorius believed she had taken them to heart and continued. So, our top priority is to ensure the loyalty of the army. To achieve that, we need to meet their needs and desires, at least to some extent. Are you suggesting we pamper them with luxuries? Artoria resisted, her eyes glaring earnestly, as if ready to confront Artorius if he were to say yes. Of course not. Satisfying desires too easily leads to greed. Fortunately, the standards set by you are low enough that we can gradually improve. We can start by providing them with something better than black bread. For example, some meat, hot soup, and vegetable rations. It would be enough to sustain their lives and make them better off than the commoner. It will be enough to barely support their families. We simply don't have enough resources. Artoria firmly rejected Artorius. And even if we did, we should prioritize aiding the people. That's not a problem. Artorius took a deep breath. He realized that continuing to argue with her would be meaningless. This person was as stubborn as a rock and completely ignorant of people's hearts. I can provide those supplies, Artorius said seriously. After all, I am still the prince, so, father, I am willing to supply Camelot with additional resources, a sufficient amount to sustain the entire kingdom, the army, and their families. After all, Camelot was just one of the many countries within Britain, with only a few tens of thousands of people. It wouldn't be a burden for Artorius, who ruled over millions in the Germanic land. Before Artoria could respond, Artorius continued. Naturally, these resources won't be given for free. My request is, the Knights of the Round Table. Of course, not all of them. I only want the top 12 knights. Father, I ask that you order the 12 Knights of the Round Table to join my command. What do you think, father? Isn't this a good deal? Artorius believed it was a win-win deal. He would gain a scarce and elite group of top-notch warriors, while Artoria would obtain the resources to improve the lives of the people of Camelot. With this elite force, Artorius would have an advantage in facing the challenges of the Germanic peoples and the Romans. His plans would go more smoothly, and the Pendragon dynasty would attain supreme glory. They would replace Capet, Hohenzollern, Plantagenet, and Rurikids. In the future, they would substitute for Bourbon, Habsburg, and Romanov. Even as they entered a new era, experiencing Napoleon, 2 world wars, and countless upheavals and chaos between the outer and inner worlds, Artorius would ensure the splendor, continuity, and greatness of the entire Pendragon dynasty through his intelligence and abilities. Whether in the outer world or the inner world. When all these resources and technologies matured, Artorius would go further, thoroughly saving the entire human race. He would liberate humanity from the control of the counter-force and provide true redemption and freedom. This would inevitably involve a game with the counter-force, battles, exchanges, and conflicts with extraterrestrial civilizations, as well as the obstacles posed by other human organizations. But even so, Artorius would persevere. Forge the future, break free from Earth, and venture into the cosmos. Annihilate all the wandering star, Felber, Ultimate One nonsense, and other god-forsaken things until his human universe plan is accomplished. Then they can finally enjoy peace of mind. That was the entirety of Artorius Pendragon's plan. At this time, the so-called usurping fate plan seemed grand in scale, but it was just a mere part of the grand plan in reality. Even with just that part, it had already violated the taboos of the counter-force. That's why Artorius hadn't even informed Mordred about the following grand plan. Because it was simply too dangerous. The more people who knew, the greater the risk. Rather than foolishly bashing one's head against the wall or just YOLO like Artoria did, ending up with a broken head and bloodshed, Artorius believed strategy was necessary. How did the wise ones put it? Protecting people while losing land preserves both people and land. Losing people while losing land leads to the loss of both people and land. So they must preserve the living no matter what. They had to ensure their own survival. After all, if they couldn't survive, even if they established the human universe, ushering in a beautiful new era, they wouldn't be able to enjoy it. Therefore, in that round of dealings with his mother, incorporating the Knights of the Round Table into his control was the first step towards the new world. Such a magnificent first step. A small step for humanity, a great step for the Pendragon dynasty. You agree, right? It benefits both of us, doesn't it, my dear father? Artorius looked at his mother with delight and eager anticipation. Artoria's expression struggled, then became calm. Then she looked at her beloved son, Artorius, with seriousness and determination. Your terms are very favorable, my dear child. I can tell you genuinely want to help. You truly want to contribute to Britain. However, I refuse. Her crystal-like eyes earnestly gazed at Artorius as she asked, those things. Did you acquire them through plundering, exploiting, and oppressing? I know, Artorius, that in your Germanic regions, you have been implementing high-pressure policies, destroying those who defy you. Or forcing them to pay taxes and provide provisions. I cannot accept such resources. Artorius. The frost dragon of Europe fell silent for a few seconds. Father. Artorius struggled to control his emotions, but ultimately, he couldn't. I've managed my regions well. He took a deep breath and then angrily said. In my territories, anyone who works diligently can survive. All individuals of value can live well, including the military, soldiers, craftsmen, mages, scholars, and technicians. They all receive good treatment. Farmers and laborers can support their families through their own efforts. Women are organized for textile production, and children are encouraged to contribute through labor and learning to the best of their abilities. Even those without value, such as the disabled, those who have lost their ability to work, and the elderly, are not abandoned. Under my care, they can all obtain a luxurious livelihood that is exceedingly rare in this era. What more do you want from me? If I were to govern Germanic peoples with your idiotic sharing hardships together approach, I would be slaughtered by the dissatisfied Germanic lunatics, along with my entire people in the next second. Do you understand that? Artoria shook her head, looking at Artorius with a gaze of helplessness, as if she were looking at a child who had gone astray. Although Artorius also had a similar look in his eyes when he looked at her. Chapter 69, Argument, 3. Artorius spoke the truth. Under his mobilization, the entire Germanic military region operated at high speed. Everyone was driven and motivated, striving desperately for survival and a better life. They worked hard, produced tirelessly, and engaged in killing and plundering those who were not part of the Germanic military region, those who were not their own. This attitude of striving in life and way of life perfectly aligned with this era and would continue to be the norm in Europe for thousands of years to come. Even in modern times, such a situation still exists, still considered normal, only cloaked in layers of elaborate and highly deceptive facades. Artorius excelled at it. As a ruler and a leader, it was the same for him. He rewarded and punished clearly, he was generous, and he led the way in war. He governed his territories with wisdom and insight. To his own people, he was the best leader one could have. The kind of leader for whom even on the brink of death, one could cry out, "Leader, in my next life, I'll follow you again." But to his enemies, he was a demon, a calamity, a nightmare, the embodiment of terrifying destruction. In the Black Forest, he was the mad and ruthless frost dragon, their hero, their archenemy. In this little ice age, while everyone strived to survive, could one say it was wrong? Those Germanic tribes that did not belong to the Germanic military region treated Artorius as subjects in the same way. And there were also the Romans, the Slavs, and the nomadic people of the steppes. Everyone was damn used to such things. That was the difference between Artorius and Artoria. Artoria, who was idealistic and taught by Uther and Merlin, was bestowed with the title of the perfect king. However, she could not accept Artorius's realism, pragmatism, and utilitarianism. Artorius, you're talking about Camelot alone, and not Britain, right? Artoria said to Artorius like this, "You can't provide resources to secure the entire Britain, can you?" Artorius: "Yes, I can't." He remained silent for a moment and then said to Artoria, "At least, we can't provide them freely, to those kings and lords." Artorius didn't finish the second half of his sentence, which was he needed their people, manpower, knights, and army. If they wanted resources, they had to give something in return. And then, those people and the army would become part of the Germanic military region, fighting to the death for Artorius's ambitions. Just like all ambitious people in this world. But, there is a mistaken view here. Artoria was not indifferent to the people starving to death, nor was she a fool who did not understand why her son did all those things. Instead, all of this was because she believed that the Holy Grail could save her country, restore the concentration of true ether to its former level, and bring Britain back to its good old days. In light of this, why must she follow her son's plan, which causes the people to suffer, turning them into tools of war and cannon fodder? They sacrifice long-lasting peace and even their lives for temporary gains, leaving their homes behind and heading to the cold and war-torn Europe. But, father, can you really find the Holy Grail? What if you can't? Or what if you find it, but it doesn't possess the great power you believe it holds? Artorius continued his questioning reluctantly, only to be met with a happy smile on her face. "Let me tell you some good news." Artoria showed a cheerful expression, saying, "We have received news about the whereabouts of the Holy Grail. Sir Percival has sent word, confirming the location of the Holy Grail. Now, if a knight of pure and noble heart goes there, they can obtain the Holy Grail. Artorius, your plan has completely failed." As she spoke these words, Artoria displayed pure delight and a sense of relief. It must be that in her eyes, the long period of endurance, suffering, and trouble was about to come to an end. Britain would return to its good old days. Upon hearing these words, Artorius, on the other hand, felt as if he had fallen into an icy cave. So, the Holy Grail had been located. No wonder Galahad bid farewell to himself before. So that's how it is. In that case, the course of history would be exactly the same as before. Meaning, Galahad would die. And even that is not the worst outcome. The worst outcome is when the king truly receives the Holy Grail. That will be like the damn sixth singularity, the Lion King's ending. Damn it! Artorius. Seeing Artorius stunned, Artoria's heart softened. She took a step forward and embraced Artorius by the neck. That's why, you don't have to work so hard anymore. You don't have to sacrifice yourself for the people, and you don't have to bear the weight of the nation. I have everything arranged. Artoria gently embraced her beloved son. You will return to Britain, back to my side, right, Artorius? She looked at Artorius with hopeful eyes. And the response she received was Artorius's equally gentle embrace. Ah! Indeed, this was his mother. Gently carrying everything on her shoulders. Even if she was deceived, wrongly educated, and treated as a tool for saving the homeland, she was always striving for the best. The only thing different from the original history was probably himself. She entrusted many beautiful emotions to himself, her son. So this time, it was his turn to refuse. The Holy Grail plan is doomed to fail. Artorius calmly looked at Artoria. The counter-force will not allow any mistakes in the proper human history. Britain is fated to perish. That's engraved in the inevitability of proper human history. That incubus should have told you that. Artorius. If I'm guessing correctly, the Holy Grail is a trap. Artorius continued calmly, it's a trap set by the counter-force. There won't be a good ending by obtaining the Holy Grail. Artorius. So, father, forget about that Holy Grail nonsense and be more realistic. Artorius. Answer my question first. Artorius interrupted her with a louder voice than Artoria's. If the Holy Grail is useless, what would you do, father? The Holy Grail. Answer me. Would you do whatever it takes to let the people of Britain survive? Even if it means going against your own will, ideal, and morality. There was a long silence in response to Artorius, but afterward, Artoria still answered him. I would. Even if, through slaughter and plunder, even if in the end, the concept of Celts disappears, and our bloodline merges into the Germanic peoples, as long as everyone can be happy, then. Very well. Artorius nodded. Remember what you just said. After saying that, he kissed his mother's forehead. Then let's try the Holy Grail first. If the Holy Grail works, I'll stay in Britain just like you wish. If the Holy Grail doesn't work, then we'll do as I said, agree. After a moment of silence, Artoria nodded, putting Artorius completely at ease. Well, that's good, although I feel a bit sorry for Galahad. Artorius thought sadly in his mind. Everything would unfold according to history. Galahad would fail and then die. By that time, Artoria would be completely heartbroken. In the original history, after the Holy Grail returned to the heavens, Artoria lost all motivation to move forward and just mechanically carried out what she should do from then on. But this time, Artorius presented her with a different path. Even if it hurtful, even if it went against her will, Artoria would follow the path indicated by Artorius, her son. Perhaps at that time, her heart would become twisted. Perhaps she would become a merciless and cruel king like the altar version. But what difference did it make? In the end, they would live happily together. Humanity would be saved. The world would be saved. Even though Galahad would die in exchange. But in another 1,000 or so years, he would return as a servant to Chaldea. So, all in all, wasn't it a gain? However, I will personally confirm it and personally take the Holy Grail. Artoria's next words once again shocked Artorius. If it's really a trap, then let me be the sacrifice. Father. But. By that time, Artorius, you will inherit all of Britain. Facing Artorius, who was almost speechless with surprise, Artoria smiled gently. Although I can't fully understand. I believe you will become a better king than me. You are more suitable for this era, stronger than me. If it's you, even without relying on mystery, you will surely succeed. Father. Because you are my pride, my child, my son. Artoria lightly kissed the side of Artorius's face. When that time comes, Carry my last wishes and go forward with strength. My son. Author's note. Here, everyone should remember a few essential points. Artoria opposes Artorius's plan based on one premise, which is the Holy Grail. Many of you are spoiler enthusiasts who know that the Holy Grail doesn't work. But she doesn't know that. You can't expect her to act, respond, and be like you who know the truth. To sustain through killing, conquering, and plundering. Artorius's actions indeed bear the nature of evil. What he's doing is essentially no different from the invading Anglo-Saxons in Britain. Artoria naturally feels repulsed. Her view goes something like this. Kid, my salary will be paid in 2 days. I'll buy you some food then. Just endure for 2 more days. What? You can't endure for 2 days and have to resort to robbery? Why did you do that? The premise on which she makes her judgment is that the Holy Grail will works and restores Britain's land to its former glory as in the Age of Gods. If it truly works and has no negative outcomes, then it's indeed better than Artorius's plan. But after Artorius pointed out the flaws in the Holy Grail, Artoria became hesitant and a seed of doubt took root in her heart. Chapter 70, Uneasiness. Father. Because you are my pride, my child, my son. Artoria lightly kissed the side of Artorius's face. When that time comes, carry my last wishes and go forward with strength. My son. But if that's the case, father, you will. I will die. But it's okay. With her eyes as pure and flawless as crystal, she gently looked at Artorius. Because we already have Artorius, don't we? You are a better savior than I am. Right from the beginning. You are my excellence, my everything. Even if I die, you will take care of Britain. You will do a better job than I did. So I can die without regrets. A pure smile, like that of Artoria Lily, appeared on her face. Artorius felt heavy-hearted. He couldn't persuade his mother, no matter how hard he tried. Artoria was willingly sacrificing herself for her country and people. Even though Artorius warned her that it might be a trap, she also had a faint sense of it herself. Yet, she was still willing to give it a try. As she had said, even if she died, there would still be Artorius. That's what she believed. Oh, my idealistic, foolish, and adorable father. Artorius sighed helplessly. All he could do was hold his gentle, petite, and lovely mother tightly, expressing his frustration. As he held her in his arms, Artorius didn't see the glorious and radiant king of knights or the red dragon incarnation who could single-handedly defeat Vortigern and emerge victorious. Instead, he saw a delicate girl in need of protection. She wasn't born as a human. She wasn't raised as a human. She wasn't educated as a human. She wasn't used as a human. She had never lived for herself. Yet, it was this girl who stood up at the critical moment when the Celts of Britain faced the imminent threat of being wiped out by the Saxon invaders. She led the charge, reclaiming lost territories and defeating the terrifying White Dragon. In the original history, she defeated Rome and the traitorous knights, almost vanquishing all enemies. From the perspective of bystanders or those who judge from an omniscient standpoint, they might feel that her actions were not good enough, not fulfilling enough, or not excellent enough. But from the perspective of the person involved, Artoria Pendragon, there couldn't be a more suitable role for her. After all, in the original history, there was no Artorius. Artorius. Enjoying the love and care of her child, Artoria smiled with happiness. It seemed like she had let go of all burdens, responsibilities, and pressures. At this moment, she was completely content and ready to sacrifice herself at any time. With that, Artorius left. Now, what should I do next? Artorius pondered. Persuading his mother to stay away from the Holy Grail was impossible. So, how could he stop her? Should he reveal her secret as a woman to the public and claim the throne? No, no, no. That would be a path of usurpation and wouldn't stop her at all. Even if she were not the king, she could still go to the continent and obtain the Holy Grail. Then proceed to the throne of heroes. So, should he confine her, hold her, imprison her in the dungeon? Unless it's absolutely necessary, it's best not to do that. Artorius thought to himself. Otherwise, father will surely resent me for the rest of his life. So, that means. With this idea in mind, Artorius had already made up his mind. Just get to the Holy Grail before father does. If someone must be sacrificed, just throw in some insignificant person. Not father, not Galahad. Just let some random person touch the Holy Grail. Of course, I have to keep it a secret from father, otherwise, he won't be at ease. I need to plan it properly. Oh, right. How about making that damned Merlin touch the Holy Grail? TCH, it seems impossible, that guy still has some usefulness. Artorius felt a bit regretful about this. Artorius swiftly devised a cunning plan, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. Then, at the entrance to King Arthur's study, he encountered his nominal mother, Guinevere. Unlike Artoria, who maintained the appearance of a 15-year-old, Guinevere, approaching 30, appeared mature and dignified, embodying the gentle demeanor of a wife. "What's wrong, Artorius?" she asked, somewhat concerned. "I heard a loud noise just now. Did you have an argument with your father?" "It's nothing, don't worry," Artorius replied, maintaining his respect for his nominal mother. He smiled and reassured her, pretending everything was fine. After uttering these words, he turned to leave. But before he could do so, "Artorius!" Guinevere called out to him. "Treat your father well," she said with a gentle voice. "He's been going through a lot lately, so, please consider his feelings, okay? Of course, after all, he is my dearest father." Artorius responded nonchalantly, but it made Guinevere uneasy. As a result, she entered the study room. "What happened, my king? What did you and Artorius discuss? Did you have an argument?" "You could say we argued," Artoria replied. "But don't worry, we've made up." She smiled and approached Guinevere. "Guinevere, you've always worked hard." Guinevere felt worried by Artoria's words, a faint sense of unease rising within her. "My king, are you saying?" she started. "Soon, you will attain your freedom, Guinevere," Artoria gently said. "You no longer need to worry about me. You can enjoy your life freely. I will go to Europe to obtain the Holy Grail. Regardless of success or failure, I will pass the throne to Artorius. And then, you can pursue what you truly desire." Artoria spoke these words to Guinevere, but they failed to bring her joy. She only felt sorrow, and as she embraced her closest friend, tears uncontrollably streamed down her face. Author's note: Merlin's attitude towards Artoria in the original work was that he did indeed inform her that Britain was fated to perish, and that part is correct. But the following interaction more or less goes like this. "Artoria, but we should still try our best." "Merlin, then let's give it a try. If it's you, there's a chance you might succeed." And then he continues to observe Artoria perform and ponders, "I'll advise her again after some time. It wouldn't hurt to try, right?" As time goes on, they reach the time of the Battle of Camlan, and Artoria is trapped forever in the confines of time, bearing the pain and regret, waiting for the summoning of the Holy Grail War to make a wish and fix her so-called mistake of she should never be the king and pulled the Caliban. While Merlin exclaims something like, "What the hell? Did I mess up?" and then retreats into a 20-story tower, shutting himself in while inadvertently leaving Vivian behind. Furthermore, Artoria isn't acting out of stubbornness. The premise of her statement to Artorius is that she has already found the Holy Grail, and they are only awaiting a pure and noble person to claim it. At that moment, she believed she was the only suitable candidate. Moreover, in the event of the Holy Grail plan's failure, she has a backup plan, which involves executing Artorius's plan. His presence would allow her to die without worry. Chapter 71, Confusion. And so, Artoria was accompanied tenderly by Guinevere. As for Artorius, after going through so much, he wanted to find a woman to comfort himself. He needed to regain his spirits before delving into any further conspiracies. Thus, he walked towards Mordred's room. "Let's go and confide in little Mo, and discuss the details while we're at it." That was Artorius's plan. However, halfway through his journey, he coincidentally ran into Morgan, who seemed equally frustrated. She had just left Mordred's room. She was angry because once again, her children had betrayed her. Taking advantage of Artorius's absence, she had discreetly approached Mordred, hoping to gather some information about him and, in the process, convince Mordred to continue working for her. Unfortunately, she failed. Regarding the success or failure of obtaining information, it was a delicate matter to discuss. Mordred enthusiastically shared stories about Artorius, although most of it was "my big brother is amazing" and "my big brother is very kind," excessively adorned with her personal touch. Nonetheless, Morgan could still extract some useful intelligence from those words. However, when it came to persuading Mordred to continue helping her, Morgan utterly failed. Mordred firmly rejected her, holding her head high and assuming a haughty air as she said to Morgan, "It's not possible, mother. Because I am now my brother's knight, I only obey his commands." Damn it! Hearing Mordred's words, Morgan felt both furious and puzzled. What had Artorius done to bewitch her daughter? She pondered how she could convince Mordred, whether through threats or by reminding her that as a daughter, she must obey her mother. However, before Morgan could decide on her approach, Mordred surprised her by initiating the conversation. "Mother," she said earnestly to Morgan, "why don't you also serve him? He is an excellent and fair ruler. If you earnestly serve him, he will grant you your wishes." Hearing those words, Morgan was almost rendered speechless with anger. This unfilial daughter! She had never shown such dedication when working for her. But now that she was working for her brother, she was playing the role of a devoted servant, acting like a fanatic. Who was she trying to deceive? Of course, amidst her anger, Morgan had a brief moment, only a moment of intrigue. Would Sir Artorius truly fulfill her wishes? What were her wishes again? To gain control over Britain? Ah, yes, that's right. She wanted to acquire Britain. It had nothing to do with desiring the love she longed for from her nephew. With these thoughts in mind, Morgan didn't choose to confront Mordred. Instead, she gave her a half-hearted response and left with a mind full of frustration. Damn it, how did this happen? Morgan muttered to herself, simultaneously annoyed and puzzled. Her own sons and daughters were incredibly rebellious. Each one had betrayed their creator, Morgan Le Fay. But why were they so loyal and devoted to the Pendragon father and son? The brothers, Gawain and Gaheris, were all serving in the Germanic military region, having risen to the position of legion commander. They were crucial pillars of Artorius's military. Their loyalty to him was unwavering. As for Gareth, due to her age and gender, she hadn't been given a significant role in the military. However, she held the position of captain. The elite heavy knights known as the Dragon Sentinel, the finest soldiers under Artorius's command, were under her control. Agravain, on one hand, handled various administrative tasks in the Germanic military region, and on the other hand, served as the leader of Artorius's spies and assassins division. He was responsible for covert operations. The guy had become one of Artorius's most fervent supporters. In private conversations, he often said things like, "His Highness Artorius is the best choice, he is the most suitable ruler, and he is the ruler I have been searching for." Similar words were spoken on numerous occasions. And then there was Mordred. This individual was Artorius's right hand and even considered his companion and successor. Her attitude toward him was unquestionable. This group of Morgan Le Fay's children were all exceptional individuals. She had specially selected, created, and trained them using Age of Gods genetic technology. Initially, they were content to stay by Artoria's side in Camelot. However, now there was an entire Germanic military region, larger than the territory of Britain itself, providing them with a bigger stage to fully unleash their potential and achieve even greater excellence and perfection than in the original timeline. In Arthurian legends, Gawain didn't even command a legion of tens of thousands, let alone Gareth's 400 elite soldiers. The feudal system was completely feudal, with vassals having vassals, and the efficiency of mobilizing troops was questionable. The chain of command was far from smooth, and each commander had only a limited number of direct subordinates. How did this come to be? Pondering these thoughts, Morgan found it strange and perplexing. Did Pendragon possess some strange charm that caused people to be fiercely loyal? But that couldn't be right. After all, she was part of Pendragon too. Why had she become so estranged from everyone? Lost in her confusion, Morgan encountered her beloved nephew, Artorius Pendragon, in the corridor. Artorius also noticed her presence, his dear aunt, Morgan Le Fay. Chapter 72, Bad Mood. A bonus chapter for every 1k power stones. Thank you for the support. Oh my dear nephew, you seem to be in a good mood. Did something happen? This was the first private meeting between Artorius and Morgan since the incident they were involved in. The latter seemed to have forgotten how her dear nephew had humiliated her before. Morgan's smile was sweet, even intoxicating. If one were to talk about her maternal side alone, it didn't seem much different from the previous Guinevere. For anyone meeting her for the first time, they certainly wouldn't associate this gentle big sister with the witch queen who had brought chaos to Britain. Of course, Artorius did not. From start to finish, Artorius maintained the highest level of caution towards this woman. Can Morgan make use of the Holy Grail? After contemplating for a moment, Artorius said with a negative tone in his mind, let's just use that guy Merlin. Reluctantly, he nodded at Morgan, considering it a basic courtesy to respond to her question. After that, he turned around, preparing to leave. But before that, did you have a fight? Did you have a fight with my foolish sister? Phew, I guess that's as expected. After all, the gap between you two is too obvious. You can't possibly get along well. As Artorius turned his back, already 2 steps away, he heard Morgan's joyful, mocking words. And so, the next second, Morgan got what she wanted, Artorius pinning her against the wall. Let me warn you, woman. Artorius stared at her with a dangerous look, making Morgan's heartbeat accelerate. Don't try to manipulate my relationship with father. As he spoke, he extended his finger to lift Morgan's chin, making their eyes meet. Just that simple contact between their skins made Morgan feel her body heat up, and her breathing grew heavier. Otherwise, you will regret it. After saying those words, Artorius released Morgan and then turned around, continuing in Mordred's room direction. In such a bad mood, it seemed that he really needed Mordred's gentle comfort. Compared to the stubborn and inflexible king who didn't know how to adapt, the witch who seemed to exude a dark aura all over, as well as the tyrannical battle-crazed teacher, or any other irrelevant character, Mordred was undoubtedly the best. His little sister was obedient and always listened, doing whatever she was told without any fuss or unnecessary complications. It was truly wonderful. But then, he heard Morgan's voice again from behind. It seemed that she didn't really take Artorius's warning seriously. That sister of mine is quite persistent, isn't she? She has no idea how to adapt and is as rigid as a rock. Artorius turned around again, this time not directly pinning Morgan against the wall but narrowing his eyes, silently observing her. Morgan seemed to interpret this as encouragement, so she became bolder and more direct in her actions. She approached Artorius on her own initiative, reaching out her finger and lightly stroking his chest, tilting her head up, looking at him with a pleased expression. You and her are destined to be incompatible. She continued to speak to Artorius. She's someone idealistic who doesn't understand the human feeling and heart. You're different. You know the reality in front of you and how to adapt. You can do anything to achieve your goals. That's why. Her finger continued to slide down, caressing Artorius's firm abdomen, while her body leaned in closer. We are the same, Artorius. We are a perfect match. Saying this, Morgan felt her mouth dry. She slightly opened her mouth, and her bright red tongue emerged, licking her lips, silently inviting Artorius. After a few seconds of silence, Artorius smiled. With father, I have to be more serious, more cautious, and not act recklessly. But with my aunt, I can be a bit more casual, a bit more free. With this in mind, he reached out and embraced Morgan's slender waist, pulling her into his arms with a slightly forceful motion, and kissed her to dominance. Tonight, I'll be waiting for you. After the forceful kiss, Morgan, feeling somewhat satisfied after moaning erotically, said happily to Artorius, then released herself from his embrace and swayed her hips as she left happily. The slight advantage made her feel closer to Artorius, even creating a subtle illusion that she had a chance to win against her sister, although this competition was different from the usual ones. Despite investing more effort than Artoria in winning his heart, there were even suspicions that she used unconventional tricks. Nevertheless, a win is a win, right? At least she could savor the sweet taste of victory. What a bastard! Artorius mumbled frustratedly. Having been frustrated by a good woman like Artoria, he found some solace with a bad woman like Morgan. What irony! Afterward, Artorius continued forward and entered Mordred's room. Brother! Mordred greeted Artorius with a cheerful smile as she hadn't noticed what Artorius, her beloved brother, had done with a certain rude, evil, cunning, and sarcastic woman near her room. Little Mo. In front of his adorable sister, Artorius could finally let go of his burdens and show a slightly troubled and weary expression without any problem. Unlike in front of his subordinates, where he had to maintain a calm and composed appearance even when he was frustrated and mentally exhausted. It was necessary to maintain control in order to keep the situation under control. Otherwise, it would shake the morale and loyalty of his subordinates. Only Mordred needed no doubt in her determination, confidence, or loyalty, so she was Artorius's solace. Is something the matter? Ah, of course, you don't have to say anything if you don't want to. Skillfully using her thighs as a pillow for Artorius, Mordred gently held his hand and said so. Something came up, I'll tell you when I'm feeling better. Artorius replied. I understand. And so, Artorius rested his head on Mordred's thighs and closed his eyes. Take a short rest, since there's still some time. However, though she didn't want to disturb her brother's rest, after being by Artorius's side for so long, Mordred understood what was urgent and what wasn't. What is it? Actually, Mordred said to him, Sir Galahad came by earlier. It seems he has something to discuss with you. It was regarding Galahad's departure. As Mordred mentioned him, Artorius also recalled it once more. Truly, none of them can put one's mind at ease. I understand. So Artorius got up. I'll go. Brother. It's okay, don't worry, little Mo. I'm not that fragile. Mordred showed a radiant smile. Chapter 73, For His Highness. Later that evening, Galahad was restlessly pacing in his room when he heard a knock on his door. Sir Galahad. Your Highness. With remarkable speed, the frail young man with thin white hair stood up and opened the door to his room, welcoming Artorius with an attitude that was more apprehensive than respectful. How have things been lately? Thank you, it's not bad. After this unfruitful exchange of pleasantries, Artorius and Galahad fell into silence. They sat in silence for a while until Artorius finally spoke up. Galahad, I assume you have heard the news about the Holy Grail. Yes, indeed. Galahad nodded. After that, Artorius thought quickly to himself. When Artoria suggested that she would be the one to retrieve the Holy Grail, the safest way would be to send Galahad to its location overnight and recreate the original plot. That would be the most appropriate course of action. But Galahad is one of my most outstanding subordinates and my best friend. Artorius thought, if the original storyline requires a specific individual to lift the Holy Grail, a scoundrel like Merlin won't do. In the end, I might have to sacrifice Galahad. He was in a dilemma and already ran out of time. So, Your Highness. As Galahad looked at Artorius in silence, cruel as it may be, he had no idea that the man sitting across from him was contemplating whether to save his mother by sacrificing him or not. The situation weighed heavily on Galahad's mind, as he worried about the repercussions his actions might have on Artorius, fearing that he might anger him. Whatever, let's consider Galahad as a backup option. Artorius thought tiredly. I need to act fast and bring a group of expendable pawns to the location of the Holy Grail. First, let the pawns go, then let Merlin go, and then, let Galahad go. I must resolve this matter before she comes into contact with the Holy Grail. After thinking realistically and making up his mind, Artorius looked at Galahad with a helpless gaze. Galahad. Artorius said to him, why do you want to go? He continued, we have experienced so much together. From Britain to Rome, and then to Germania. Wars, killings, governing territories, resolving disputes, creating laws, cultivating land, building castles, workshops, lumber mills, ports. We have done it all exceptionally well, haven't we? You have helped me a great deal, Galahad. You are my best friend, my most outstanding subordinate, and one of the finest commanders under my command. Artorius's tone carried a mix of helplessness and indignation. Are you doubting me? Do you know how much sadness that brings me? My sorrow surpasses that of Tristan. Although deep down inside, he thought of sacrificing the other party, Artorius still maintained an outward appearance of grief, making Galahad feel quite embarrassed. Do you think I am the kind of person who would disregard justice for personal gain? Do you think I would drag Britain into the flames for my own ambition? Do you think I would prevent the salvation of Britain if the Holy Grail could achieve it? No, of course not, Galahad. If the Holy Grail can save Britain, I would never hinder you. Faced with Artorius's earnest words, Galahad's heart was filled with emotion, even more stirred up. Yes, that's right, this is the prince I know, the lord I serve with my utmost loyalty. It is precisely because of this that I am willing to sacrifice my life for you, Your Highness. In the presence of such sacredness and profound compassion, Galahad's heart swelled with excitement, completely oblivious to Artorius's hidden thoughts. Since that is the case, what we need to do now is to go to the Holy Grail as quickly as possible and retrieve it. Artorius decisively said to Galahad. If we return one day earlier, the people of Britain will suffer one day less. Yes, you're right. The location of the Holy Grail has been confirmed, right? You know the location, don't you? Artorius looked at him seriously and asked. Yes, Sir Percival and Sir Bors found the Holy Grail. However, they couldn't lift it. It is said that only someone with a noble and pure heart can lift the Holy Grail. So, I want to try. Good, then what are we waiting for? Let's leave now. Now! Galahad exclaimed. Yes, now. Artorius turned to the side. How long are you going to keep watching, Merlin? After being called out by Artorius, a man with long white hair strolled over with a stylish gait. My, I thought my invisibility magic was unbeatable, but it seems it has been exposed. Humph. I know that you bastard just love to join in on the fun. Artorius scoffed. You know what you need to do, Merlin. Of course, of course. I'll take you all to the location of the Holy Grail, using the fastest method possible. That's why magecraft is such a convenient thing, even though I sometimes end up biting my tongue while reciting the spells. So. Alright, I'll do it, okay? Don't give me that terrifying look, Artorius. By the way, I even carried you when you were a child, you know. Merlin's words made Artorius itch to draw his sword, but Merlin skillfully and effortlessly manipulated his magecraft, opening a portal leading to Europe, more precisely, the Gaul region. It seemed that he also knew the whereabouts of the Holy Grail without Galahad needing to speak. Galahad's expression became uncomfortable as he listened to the conversation between Artorius and Merlin. Perhaps it started from the moment Artorius entered his room and mentioned this matter. Galahad felt a strong sense of unease. It was as if he would have to pay a painful price, sacrificing something very important to him. Is it my life? Galahad thought so. And then quickly made up his mind. No, even if it means sacrificing my life, I will fulfill His Highness's wish. It's not about saving Britain, but... He looked at Artorius, his eyes filled with emotions. It's about His Highness's wish. With such determination, Galahad walked towards the portal. After they crossed the portal, Galahad looked around in surprise. The air was cold, insects chirped, and the stars and moon in the sky proved they were in the midst of the wilderness. To be more precise, it's Burgundy. Artorius calmly said beside him. Southeast of Gaul, by the banks of the Seine. It's surprising that the Holy Grail would be in a place like this. Look over there. Afterward, Artorius pointed into the distance. In the vast plain, amidst the sound of the flowing Seine river, a holy, platinum light rose into the sky. If I'm not mistaken, that's where the Holy Grail is located. While saying this, Artorius reached behind him and squeezed a magic crystal with his right hand. Chapter 74, Real or Fake? Meanwhile, in Mainz. This former capital of the Roman Empire's Upper Germania gradually regained its vitality under the management of Artorius. Gathering the displaced, cultivating the land, and constructing fortresses. Thanks to convenient transportation and its strategic location, Mainz rose once again and became the administrative center of General and Governor Artorius called the Germanic Military Region. During Artorius's absence, the one who took over administrative duties and also oversaw intelligence work was Agravain, Artorius's teacher in his younger days. Ignoring the time and late nights, Agravain tirelessly dealt with government affairs. Rubbing his eyes slightly, he prepared to drink a few sips of hot soup to rejuvenate himself when he noticed a frost-colored crystal shining on one side of his office. His Highness needs at least 100 volunteers, and the location is Burgundy, this landmark, With great speed, he stood up and walked over to the crystal, receiving the message. What are you planning, Your Highness? Due to limited magical energy, Artorius didn't fully explain the matter to him. However, this didn't hinder Agravain's loyalty or his execution of orders. In this regard, he and Merlin were two extremes, in opposite ways. One was reliable, while the other was not, in other words, extremely unreliable. Meanwhile, Sir Galahad, Lord Merlin, and Prince Artorius. Shortly after Artorius and his party set off toward the light, they encountered familiar faces. Bors and Percival of the Knights of the Round Table remained in their original location, sending messages back to Camelot. They established a camp. Inside the camp, in addition to them, there were their squires and other knights of the Round Table who had gathered after receiving the news, as well as local guides. Because of the light emitted by the Holy Grail, they even saved on building a bonfire, instead gathering around the Holy Grail and establishing a small camp. When they saw Artorius and his group approaching, the knights of the Round Table were somewhat tense until they confirmed that it was their people, at which point they breathed a sigh of relief. "I see, Sir Galahad has come to retrieve the Holy Grail." Bors, who said these words, felt a slight sense of disappointment. He said to Artorius and his party, "Sir Percival, the other knights of the Round Table, as well as our squires, have all tried. The Holy Grail is as if it's rooted there, unable to be moved. So we stayed here and sent someone back to Camelot to report, and then... Your Highness, forgive me for being straightforward, but are you sent by the king?" "Not exactly," Artorius said, "but we do intend to bring the Holy Grail back to Camelot." Upon hearing Artorius's statement, the knights of the Round Table exchanged glances, however, they did not voice any objections. After all, Artorius was still the legitimate heir to the throne. They would continue to live under Artorius's rule in the future, and even if they didn't, at least their sons or grandsons would. The seasoned and pragmatic Bors remained silent, while the straightforward Percival spoke up. "Of course, Your Highness. If you can really accomplish that, it would be a great help. Because it is said that only someone with a noble and pure heart can wield the Holy Grail. So initially, we thought the person who came would be the king himself." Hearing them speak like this, Artorius's internal vigilance increased once again. The closer he got to the Holy Grail, the more he could feel the terrifying power contained within it. It was different from the Holy Grail created by the three founding families or the Holy Grail spun by a certain Gaia. The Holy Grail Artorius faced was genuine. It was the true, legendary treasure held by the Son of God, containing boundless power and terrifying potential. If one were to gauge the influence of Catholicism based on the premise that Buddhism's influence permeates the universe, it is highly likely that the authentic Holy Grail's level surpasses the counter-force which is on a planet level. It would potentially reach the cosmic level, or at the very least, the galactic level or even the cluster level. Which means, if this thing is truly the true Holy Grail, if I can truly grasp this power, then I possess a trump card to counter the counter-force, or even. Thinking this, Artorius turned his head and looked at Merlin. Although he didn't speak, his meaning was clear. Merlin should come and observe whether this Holy Grail was real or fake. In response to Artorius's gaze, the Mage of Flowers paused for a moment, then rubbed his nose and showed a shy expression. Artorius, even if you look at me like that with such intense eyes, I cannot reciprocate your feelings. Although you are indeed an exceptionally handsome youth, I, on the other hand, only have an affection for cute girls. Why don't you try Galahad, who's standing next to you? Although he may not be as gorgeous as me, Galahad is quite decent. You." When this guy was halfway through his sentence, Artorius gripped the hilt of Clarent, almost unable to resist decapitating him. Of course, he managed to hold back in the end. Not because Artorius had a good temper or any other reason. It was simply because Merlin was powerful. The odds of decapitating him weren't high. It was better to bide his time and seize the opportunity to strike hard later. "What I mean is this really the true Holy Grail?" Artorius asked directly. "Well, even I can't say for sure," came the reply. "You dick wizard, your clairvoyance is utterly useless." As Artorius continued to mentally curse him, he couldn't help but feel a bit of regret. If he had known that teaming up with Merlin would be such a headache, he would have been better off seeking out Morgan earlier. Then. Artorius sought a compromise. "Does this Holy Grail indeed contain immense power?" "That much is true." "Can you release a portion of its power?" Artorius asked further. "Well, that's not something I'm skilled at." Artorius narrowed his eyes and ran out of patience with the so-called greatest mage. "Calm down, Your Highness, calm down. Just get used to it, just get used to it. Your Highness, Lord Merlin isn't worth your time. Let him be." When Artorius couldn't resist drawing his sword again, the prepared knights of the Round Table immediately rushed forward and separated Artorius and Merlin. Seeing how skillfully these guys acted, it was clear they had experience with this kind of shenanigans. It wasn't the first time they had done this before. "Is it really impossible?" After managing to calm down reluctantly, Artorius looked at Merlin and inquired. "It really is impossible? How about changing the request then? I can teach you how to pick up girls. I guarantee you'll be satisfied." The next moment, Artorius once again unsheathed Clarent. Damn it, he was beyond mad. Does this prince really need you to teach him how to pick up girls, you dickhead? Chapter 75, Useless Merlin. Merlin is a useless piece of junk. He couldn't even lift the Holy Grail. That has been tested under the forceful supervision of the 4 Knights of the Round Table, including Artorius. Furthermore, he couldn't draw out the power from the Holy Grail at all, which is also part of Artorius's plan. On top of that, this bastard not only lacks skills but also has a loose tongue, babbling incessantly in front of everyone. It's only because Artorius has a good temper that he hasn't severed him with his sword yet and thrown him to Zelrich to become Magi Mari. Initially, Artorius was considering whether he should win this guy over and have him join his group in usurping fate. But seeing the pathetic state of this guy right now, Artorius began to doubt. Even if this guy joined his group in usurping fate, what role could he possibly play? Or perhaps, the result might be the opposite? After all, we're talking about Merlin here. Let's just return to Camelot. With that in mind, Artorius took a deep breath, losing interest in conversing with Merlin. He turned to the others who remained and said, "Go find other helpers. Keep an eye on Merlin and don't let him cause trouble. If necessary, it's okay to eliminate him. This my command as the prince." After Artorius finished speaking, the Knights of the Round Table nodded in agreement, enthusiastically vowing for Merlin's demise. Artorius nodded in satisfaction. Hey, don't talk about me like I'm trash," Merlin protested loudly. "At the very least, I can be a tool for transportation." Although he made such a statement, Merlin was still rejected by Artorius. When Artorius snapped his fingers and the portal to Camelot reopened, Merlin looked at him with surprise. He confirmed that Artorius's magecraft had made significant progress compared to before. Previously, it was a makeshift magecraft of rank B at most, but now it was a solid and well-structured rank B. This lad has managed to win new allies. Merlin thought to himself, Vivian doesn't have this ability. Then, Morgan. Merlin thought of something and, as a result, his lips curled up, revealing a pleased smile. Such a unique taste. That woman is someone I wouldn't even dare provoke. The new generation is pushing the old one forward. If Artorius knew Merlin's thoughts, he would definitely protest against what the bastard said. It seemed like Merlin was implying that Artorius had become even more of a scumbag than him, surpassing all the other 4 scumbags of Camelot. Oh my. After that, Merlin let out a slightly troubled sigh. Ha! Artorius has truly become a frightening adult. He evaluated Artorius in this way, is this what this lad has become? Before you know it, he has grown into someone unrecognizable. For your grandson, I took a hands-off approach, and the result is that he has grown into someone completely different from your daughter. Life is truly wondrous, don't you think, Uther? Calling out the name of his old friend, Merlin's face revealed a nostalgic expression. It was another emotion he imitated from humans. After reminiscing about his old friend, Merlin's gaze turned anxious as he looked at the Holy Grail. Despite always claiming his clairvoyance was useless, clairvoyance is still clairvoyance after all. The appearance of the Holy Grail meant something, and Merlin's understanding of it was second only to Artorius. So, as soon as Artorius left, his first thought was to persuade Galahad to pick up the Holy Grail, fulfill his fate, and prevent even worse things from happening. But afterward, he hesitated. Perhaps I should see what Artorius does first. Maybe Artorius has a better plan. Wait a little longer, maybe it's not impossible. Merlin is a procrastinator as always. At the same time, Artorius was already in the White Castle of Camelot. The spacious corridors made movement easy, and it was convenient to get things done when there were fewer people around. Especially when it involved those unsavory matters. Artorius was heading to Morgan's bedroom. Merlin may not speak in a civilized manner or do anything particularly useful. The previous guess regarding Artorius's magecraft, which involved Morgan, was also incorrect. However, it wasn't too far off from the truth. Artorius was indeed involved with Morgan. He even had the intention to form a deeper connection with her. It was an unavoidable matter. Merlin was hopeless, while both Vivian and Scathatch couldn't exert their full power on the surface due to the fading of True Ether's concentration. So, Morgan became the best choice for his plan. But I remember that woman said to me before. Earlier today, Morgan and Artorius had an unexpected encounter, and the witch shamelessly uttered the words, "Come find me tonight." Artorius confirmed that if she wanted him to seek her out, it definitely wasn't to tuck her into bed. After all, she wasn't Mordred or Gareth. If only it were that simple. Because Artorius was a kind and innocent boy. He was good to others, always willing to help and generous with his help. He took anything that brought joy very seriously. But the problem was not as simple as it seemed. Whatever. After hesitating for a few seconds, Artorius made a decision. Keeping a lady waiting for too long isn't gentlemanly. He strode towards Morgan's room. Upon reaching it, he pushed the door open, and a scent reminiscent of exquisite alchemical spices greeted him, momentarily dizzying Artorius. Alchemy fragrance, of the highest quality. Its effects are self-explanatory. As the Dragon Prince contemplated this, he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The room was dimly lit by magical lights emitting a faint purplish glow. With such dim and ambiguous illumination, the focus was on one side of the room on a bed covered with a sheer curtain. To be more precise, it was a bed where a breathtakingly beautiful woman lay. She exuded an air of coolness, her skin smooth, tight, and delicate like porcelain. That was Morgan Le Fay. After Artorius entered, she smiled pleasantly, looking at him as if showing off and provoking, slowly raising her exquisite leg. From top to bottom, there were translucent, dainty toenails, the smooth and fair arch of her foot, the alluring curve of her body, shapely, slender legs with just the right amount of fleshiness, and a plump, rounded ass. All of it made one yearn to devour her in a single gulp. And she was barefoot. Only women with the best conditions dare to flaunt themselves, just like Morgan. She truly is an enchantress. Artorius couldn't help but sigh. The Pendragon women, Mordred and Artoria, were great, but they still seemed a bit inexperienced. When it came to the best figure and the most tantalizing allure, it was undoubtedly Morgan.